Hello there. Tonight we climb down a narrow iron ladder into a long, cramped tube filled with strangers, sweat, and the low rumble of diesel engines. The lighting is dim, the metal walls sweat condensation, and there's barely enough space to turn around without bumping into someone's elbow or a swinging ham hock dangling from the ceiling. This isn't a subway ride or a bad Airbnb, it's your new home, a German U-boat during World War II. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just visiting. You're enlisted. It's 1941, and someone, perhaps an overly patriotic cousin or a stern recruiter in a peaked cap, has convinced you that serving in the Kriegsmarine is an excellent idea. Maybe you've romanticized the sleek silhouettes of U-boats slicing through ocean swells. Maybe you imagine silent, efficient missions, heroic torpedo launches, and long, proud salutes on return to port. Instead, you're smacking your forehead against a bulkhead because you stood up too quickly. The first thing that strikes you is how little space there actually is. Not metaphorically. Physically. The average Type 7 U-boat is barely 220 feet long and 20 feet wide, crammed with 50 grown men, supplies, batteries, torpedoes, spare parts, and every unholy combination of pipe, valve, and gauge imaginable. You get a personal space bubble roughly the size of a microwave. That's assuming no one's walking through it. You wedge your way into the control room, trying to look like you belong, but already you've made 2 wrong turns and accidentally opened a hatch to a broom closet. Everyone seems to be moving in choreographed chaos, sliding past each other with uncanny grace. You, on the other hand, have knocked over someone's mug of ersatz coffee. Welcome aboard. The air is already heavy. Not from the ocean pressure, it hasn't even dived yet, but from sheer human presence. It's been less than 10 minutes and already your shoulders ache from ducking, stooping, and weaving like you're navigating a jungle gym designed by an angry plumber. There's a saying on board, if it moves, salute it. If it doesn't, polish it. If it leaks, report it. If it smells, get used to it. You're already failing the first and last parts of that wisdom. Everything smells lived in. The diesel engines hum like a dull migraine in the background, but it's the people that get you. The scent of fear, boredom, and whatever that guy just ate before boarding, we'll get to the food situation soon, is unmistakable. A few sailors laugh at your attempts to squeeze past the radio room without knocking over the teetering pile of code sheets. You mutter something about needing to find your station, but you're already lost in a mechanical jungle where every surface has a valve, a rivet, or a way to bang your shin. It's then you realize this isn't a ship. It's a floating factory squeezed inside a metal pipe. Historically, the Type 7 U-boats were marvels of engineering, compact, powerful, and deadly efficient. But they were built with brutal priorities, torpedoes and engines first, men second. Comfort? That word didn't make it past the blueprint phase. In fact, frills might as well have been on the enemy list. The crew knows how to deal with it. Most have developed a sort of submarine shuffle, a half-crouch glide that lets them slip past steaming pipes and elbowed machinery without removing skin. You haven't. Every step you take is accompanied by a metallic thud, a scraped boot, or a sailor muttering something about greenhorns. There's one bunk that's not a bunk at all, it's the narrow space between torpedoes in the forward hold. No mattress, just a blanket and a prayer. Congratulations, it's yours. Unless someone else claims it first while you're busy figuring out where the head is. Hint, the head is the toilet. And no, It's not working right now. We'll get to that nightmare in a bit. By now, you've knocked your shoulder into a water pipe, stumbled into the cook's cupboard, and tried to open a door that hasn't been opened since France surrendered. Still, the boat is preparing to dive. You hear the announcement, torch alarm. Everything goes from grumbly chaos to mechanical ballet in seconds. You flail for a handhold as the bow dips and the angle tilts. Someone throws you a strap and grins. You are no longer on your time, you're on U-boat time now. Historians still argue whether the cramped conditions or the psychological pressure posed the greater long-term threat to crew survival. One could break bones. The other could break minds. But for now, you've got a more pressing issue. Where are you supposed to sleep, and how do you lie down without accidentally cuddling a torpedo? One fringe tale told by veterans, true or not, is of a green sailor who mistook a warm, sausage-shaped torpedo for someone's leg and apologized to it for snoring. You think it's ridiculous until you stare at your own bunk. You start to understand how someone could make that mistake in the dark. I know, it's always dark. Not pitch black, there are lights, but they're low, yellowed, and somehow make things more eerie. You already miss sunlight and you've only been submerged for 20 minutes. It's then that the claustrophobia creeps in. Slowly. Not with panic, but with inevitability. You try to stretch your legs and hit a metal wall. You shift your arm and bump into someone's feet. Breathing feels shallow, not because the air is gone, but because you're aware of how much everyone else is breathing it too. Remember that dream where the walls close in? This is that, but it smells like cabbage and hot oil. And yet, the veteran crew laughs, plays cards, and hums snatches of old songs. They found routine in this sardine can existence. You will too. Or you won't. After all, the U-boat doesn't care. It's not here for your comfort. It's here to kill enemy ships and, if you're lucky, let you live long enough to see port again. But as you sit down, awkwardly, painfully, with a pipe lodged somewhere uncomfortable, you begin to realize. That port? It's weeks away. The ship? It's barely begun its mission. And you? You're not even sure where the bathroom is. You smell it before you see it. Actually, you've been smelling it for a while now, but your brain's only just stopped trying to pretend it wasn't happening. The human mind, after all, has an incredible ability to tune out the unbearable until it can't. And now, you can't. The U-boat smells alive. Not in a fresh garden kind of way, but in a 50 human sealed in a tin can with no showers kind of way. Picture this, diesel fuel soaked into every inch of the metal, hot engine oil seeping from somewhere unfindable, stale sweat that's been layered like sedimentary rock since the last port, and socks, oh, the socks, whose last encounter with soap predates the war itself. That's your air now. You try to breathe shallowly, hoping to bypass the stench, but that only makes you dizzy. The boat's air is recycled, unfiltered, and full of microscopic souvenirs from every crew member's last breath. You're not just smelling your bunkmate, you're inhaling him. There's probably a Wilhelm molecule in your left nostril right now, and he ate cabbage earlier. The olfactory assault doesn't come from one direction. It creeps in layers. Beneath the ever-present tang of diesel fuel, there's mildew from the ever-damp walls, musty wool from the uniforms that haven't dried properly since Biscay, and something that might be potatoes or might be socks. You stop trying to distinguish them after a while. The veterans? They don't even flinch. Some say they stopped smelling it altogether. Others swear that the nose eventually surrenders and shuts down. One old hand, grinning over a cup of reconstituted coffee, jokes, that's the smell of victory. You suspect it's actually the smell of athlete's foot, but you don't say it out loud. mainstream historians agree that hygiene aboard U-boats was barely an afterthought. Bathing facilities were non-existent once you set out, and fresh clothing was a distant dream. Your sweat from day one will be your constant companion until the mission ends, or until you do. Crewmen rotated their few spare shirts like precious heirlooms. Socks were dried against the engines when possible, often crisped to a kind of burnt toast consistency that was technically wearable, if emotionally scarring. And the worst offender? The food. Oh yes, the food gets its moment in the spotlight soon, but right now you're experiencing its ghost. Old grease from 1,000 fried sausages lingers in the air, the fat having congealed in hidden corners. A week from now, that grease will go rancid. A week after that, it will be part of your dreams. One quirky tidbit from this odorous reality: some crewmen brought perfume or scented candles to help mask the worst of it. There's even one account of a first officer who rubbed mint toothpaste under his nose before bed. The mint didn't help. It just made everything smell like minty diesel despair. Of course, there are practical reasons the U-boat reeks. Ventilation is minimal. Every minute the boat stays submerged, the air quality worsens. Carbon dioxide builds, oxygen dwindles, and smells that would normally drift away just hang there. They're part of the atmosphere now. And because you're always either submerged or preparing to be, the hatches stay sealed tight. Fresh air isn't part of the package deal. You reach for your neckerchief, hoping to filter out the worst of it. It helps for a few seconds. Then the fabric itself starts to smell like everything else. You're not sure where your scent ends and U-96 begins. You two are merging. At this point, you begin to notice just how damp everything is. The air is thick, not just smelly, but moist. Sweat doesn't evaporate here, it just pools and sticks. You'd kill for a breeze. Even the fans overhead just recirculate the misery. There's something surreal about how quickly your standards adjust. When someone passes by with only a faint trace of foot odor, you almost thank them for being considerate. And when the cook brings out can meat that smells only mildly expired, you consider him a hero. You think of home, of windows you can open, of laundry fresh off the line, of lemon-scented soap and the neutral bliss of air that smells like nothing at all. You feel a pang. But don't get too attached to nostalgia, it smells even worse mixed with engine fumes. Historians still argue whether the worst smell came from the heads, toilets, the engines, or the men themselves. There's merit to each claim. The heads were poorly ventilated and famously volatile, pressurized to the point where using them wrong could cause a backblow of human waste. The engines were loud, oily, and always running hot. And the crew? Well, let's just say, eau de despair was in no short supply. One moment that really crystallizes your new reality, you pass a crewman asleep next to a crate of onions and think, lucky guy. Not because of the onions as food, but because compared to the rest of the boat, they smell divine. Of course, this environment isn't just gross, it's dangerous. Extended exposure to mold spores, bad ventilation, and rising carbon dioxide levels meant sickness was common. Respiratory issues, headaches, and even mild hallucinations became just another part of the journey. There's a reason these missions were measured in weeks, not months. No one could take it much longer than that. Including you. By the end of your first day, you stopped trying to smell anything on purpose. You breathe through your mouth and try to avoid analyzing textures. That sticky bit on the pipe near your station? Best not to wonder. That weird squish in your sock? Pretend it's just your imagination. But the most humbling moment comes later, when the air gets worse. You didn't think it could. But after your first dive deeper than 100 meters, the pressure changes cause one of the food lockers to leak. You don't know what was in there. No one does. But it smelled like fish's revenge on mankind. And there's nowhere for it to go. You lock eyes with another sailor across the corridor. He raises one eyebrow and shrugs. Just wait until the eggs go bad, he says, like he's sharing a fond memory. Your stomach flips. Welcome to U-boat life. No matter how tough you are, no matter how well you can stomach combat or isolation, your nose will betray you. And unlike the enemy above, you can't escape it. The war out there might kill you quickly. But in here? You'll be slowly marinated in the world's worst potpourri. The calm doesn't last long. 1 minute, you're balancing your tray of grayish meat and vaguely green potatoes, trying not to step on someone's toes. The next, everything tilts hard, and the metal walls erupt with an orchestra of groans, clatters, and shouted curses. The lights flicker. A high-pitched alarm wails like an angry kettle. Depth charges. You've read about them, probably even nodded sagely during the safety briefing. But no one can prepare you for what it actually feels like. The first explosion doesn't sound like a bang. It's more like the entire ocean punches the side of the boat. A deep, dull whump that rolls through your bones. The deck shudders. Dust shakes from overhead pipes. Your tray flies from your hands and splatters your neighbor with something that might once have been peas. The second one comes closer. The hull sings. Literally, it sings, a vibrating, metallic shriek that screams through your teeth and into the base of your spine. You can't breathe, not properly. You just grip the nearest pipe and hold on, because your legs have decided they no longer work. The command room is all action now. Orders shouted, levers pulled, depth gauges checked. Men move like muscle memory is doing the thinking. You're still standing there with mashed food on your boots and a face like someone just introduced you to the concept of implosion. You're not alone. Everyone, even the veterans, tenses. No one gets used to this. Depth charges were the Allies' answer to the U-boat menace. Crude, in a way, metal barrels filled with explosives, dropped from ships and set to detonate at certain depths. But effective. And terrifying. The Royal Navy isn't aiming for precision. They're tossing dozens, sometimes hundreds, hoping one gets close enough to crack your steel shell like an egg. You are that egg. Historians still argue whether the fear of depth charges or torpedo strikes was more psychologically damaging. Both could end your mission, sure, but only one gave you the long, rumbling, soul-shaking preview before death. Torpedoes were sudden. Depth charges were a drawn-out, vibrating lottery of doom. Another hit. Closer. A bulb overhead shatters, and someone swears softly in the gloom. The captain orders silent running. Now the real fun begins. Engines to minimum. No talking. No movement unless absolutely necessary. You don't even clear your throat. The pressure outside is already trying to crush you. The last thing you want is for the destroyer above to get your exact position. One creak, one cough, one dropped wrench, and it's game over. The silence is unbearable. Not the absence of sound, but the expectation of it. You wait for the next explosion. Your ears search the silence like radar. Every drip of condensation, every creak of metal becomes a personal horror. Is that the hull weakening? Is that air hissing out somewhere? Your heart is pounding so loudly you're afraid the ship can hear it. A quirky bit of U-boat folklore, some sailors claimed they could tell how close a depth charge was by the taste of it. A charge that detonated close enough made your fillings tingle or gave you a coppery jolt in your molars. No science behind it, but enough swore by it that someone probably kept a tooth diary. After 10 minutes, you realize you've been clenching every muscle in your body. Your neck aches. Your hands are cramped from gripping the pipe. You force yourself to breathe out. You try to loosen your shoulders. Then another explosion. The hull twangs like a massive guitar string. You hit the deck. This is where the U-boat becomes something else. It's no longer a weapon. It's a coffin waiting for its nail. You know intellectually that the pressure outside is immense, over 300 pounds per square inch at certain depths, but now you feel it. The walls groan under the weight of the ocean. Any failure in the pressure hull, any crack, and it's not drowning that'll kill you. It's compression. Instant. Like being crushed inside a soda can under a steamroller. You'd think you'd get used to it. You don't. After what feels like hours, it's been 22 minutes, the pings from the enemy sonar begin to fade. No more depth charges. The destroyer is either moving on or trying to flush you out. No one moves just yet. Silent running continues. Someone shifts near you. A subtle, careful breath. The boat smells like burnt rubber and fear. Eventually, the engines rise back to a low hum. Silent running ends. The captain gives the all clear. People exhale. Someone mutters a prayer. You're not religious, but you echo it. Mainstream historical records show that U-boat attacks, on average, face 2 to 3 depth charge runs per mission, many facing far more. Survival wasn't just about steel and tactics. It was about luck. Pure, infuriating luck. And here's the kicker, you still haven't fired a torpedo. You've barely started your patrol. This wasn't even an attack. Just a destroyer that picked up a noise and decided to shake a few cans. Still want to be a hero? You stumble back to your bunk. Your hands are trembling. The peas from earlier are still mashed into your boot. You consider changing socks, but that feels like too much optimism. You lie down and close your eyes. But in the dark, your brain replays every sound. The pings. The twangs. That sickening, groaning flex of the hull. They say dreams in a U-boat are vivid. Something about the lack of light, the pressure, the constant vibration. Yours tonight will be of deep, dark water and that noise, the terrifying song of steel under strain. And just when you're drifting off, lulled by the engine's lullaby, a crew member walks past and says, "That was nothing. Wait till the Americans drop their new ones." Oh. Good. Ah, yes, the toilet. You figured it would come to this eventually, didn't you? After all, when 50 men live inside a metal cylinder for weeks on end, nature will, quite literally, call. But you probably didn't realize that answering that call could kill everyone aboard. Let's paint a picture. You wake up groggy from your barely a nap, legs half asleep, breath foul, mouth dry as rust. You shuffle your way aft, past rows of sleeping bodies and the looming silhouettes of spare torpedoes. Your body is sending very clear signals. It's time. You reach the head. That's naval speak for the toilet, though calling it that is generous. You open the hatch and step into what can only be described as a metallic broom closet, one where the mop has committed a series of war crimes. The smell hits first. A cocktail of backed-up sewage, industrial disinfectant, and despair. There's condensation on the walls and a suspicious puddle beneath the bowl. You make a mental note not to slip and fall. This is not the place for an accident. A simple bruise here becomes a bacterial invitation. Now, here's where things get technical. The U-boat's toilet isn't just a seat and a flush. It's a system. One that involves valves, levers, pressurization sequences, and, if you're not careful, catastrophic hydraulic chaos. You can't just flush like you're at home. The toilet system has to be operated manually. Close this valve, open that one, pressurize the chamber, and only then eject the contents into the sea. All while ensuring you're not submerged too deep, or flushing could result in reverse flow. Yes. Reverse flow. That's when the sea decides to punch back. And when it does, it doesn't just bring water. There's a story, true, this one, of a U-boat commander in 1942 who misused the toilet while submerged too deep. The result, human waste, seawater, and high-pressure havoc flooded the compartment. The boat had to surface under enemy fire to clean it. One sailor almost drowned. Another refused to ever use the head again and reportedly used a bucket behind the engines for the rest of the patrol. The official term is a toilet malfunction. The crew called it brownout. Historians still argue whether this was due to poor design or a result of hurried wartime construction. The truth is probably both. Germany's U-boat fleet was built fast and cheap, meant to dominate the Atlantic before the Allies caught on. Comfort and logic took a back seat to torpedoes and speed. Now you stand there, holding your breath and a lever, trying to remember the sequence. Was it valve then B? Or B then close C? There's no sign, just a faint diagram etched into the steel that's smudged with years of questionable contact. You pray and pull. Nothing happens. That's either very good or very bad. A crew member knocks on the door. Al's gut, he asks, muffled through the hatch. You lie and say yes. Then the pipe makes a noise. A gurgle, followed by a hissing. Then silence. You don't move. You don't breathe. You wait. Nothing explodes. Nothing erupts. You wipe your forehead and exhale. Another quirky detail, because the head was so unreliable, many sailors simply refused to use it at all during dives. Pee jars were common. For other needs? A bucket, if you were lucky, or waiting until surface time. That's why you might spot a few crewmen skipping the cabbage stew at dinner. They know what comes next and want no part of it. Later, while talking to an engineer, you ask why the toilet is so complicated. He laughs. You think the torpedoes are hard to operate, he says. Try flushing at 80 meters. It's not just the toilet's mechanical moodiness that's frightening. It's the psychological weight. You realize that one small mistake, one lazy valve left open, could flood the compartment, short out key systems, or worse, reveal your position. Imagine the after-action report, U-Boat 218 lost due to improper bowel evacuation. Still, there are those who master the beast. A kind of twisted pride forms among them. You hear whispers about Hans, that flush king, who never once caused a leak. Some say he could do it blindfolded. Others say he did, once, just to win a bet. But for you, the experience is humbling. You clean up, check the valves 3 times, and leave the head with a mix of gratitude and trauma. It feels like you've defused a bomb. A very stinky, groaning bomb. Later, during surface time, you notice sailors queued at the hatch to relieve themselves over the side, despite the cold wind and waves. It seems ridiculous, dangerous, even, but suddenly you understand. You take freezing sea spray over that demon toilet any day. As for what happens when the toilet does malfunction during silent running? Nothing. No one uses it. Not until it's safe again. You hold it. Everyone holds it. The whole crew tightens, literally. You begin to schedule your digestion. You eat less. You avoid the greasy stew. You learn to listen for the gurgle of approval from the head before ever committing. These are the quiet skills no one teaches you in training. And somehow, they matter more than anything you learned about sonar. So here you are, fully integrated into the metal gut of the beast. Your dignity has been reduced to praying over a pressure valve. Your victories now include uneventful bathroom visits and are not getting your face splashed by recycled soup. You tell yourself this is temporary. That after the patrol, you'll laugh about this. But you won't. You'll dream about those valves for years. You are never dry. At first, it's the little things, your shirt clinging to your back longer than it should, your socks feeling slightly moist even though they've been nowhere near water. You think, maybe I just need to air things out a bit. Which is adorable, really. You haven't accepted it yet, but you will. Soon you'll understand that dryness is not part of U-boat life. Not for your body. Not for your clothes. Not for your morale. The U-boat is a floating humidity chamber wrapped in metal and pressure and bad decisions. Everything sweats, the pipes, the walls, the people. And what doesn't start out wet eventually becomes so, thanks to the endless condensation cycle. Cold outer hull meets warm interior air, and boom, perpetual damp. You could hang a towel for days and find it wetter than when you started. You try changing socks. The new pair, lovingly stashed in your kit, already feels clammy. They were stored in a locker next to the engine room, where moisture collects like political tension at a family dinner. Within hours, they're doing that thing where they slap instead of slide when you walk. A kind of moist applause, encouraging you toward trench foot. Yes, trench foot. It's not just for muddy foxholes. In the dank belly of a Type 7, standing or sitting in wet socks for days means your feet become squishy science experiments. Red patches appear. Then peeling. And if you're lucky, just a bit of bleeding. You notice one of the older crew keeps rubbing his toes with powdered chalk. You learn to do the same. It helps a little. Mainstream historians note that damp conditions were one of the biggest morale killers aboard submarines. The lack of proper ventilation, the close quarters, and the ever-present condensation created a breeding ground for mold and skin infections. U-boat commanders received strict instructions to rotate clothes, air out bedding, and keep footwear dry, but most of these rules were about as enforceable as the "don't fart in the control room." That is to say, widely ignored and impossible to regulate. And about that bedding? It's always shared. You rotate through hot bunks, sleeping in shifts so that no bed ever goes cold. You lie down in someone else's warm dent on a mattress that smells of recycled dreams and wet wool. The pillow is damp. The blanket is damp. Even the air feels like it's been wrung out of a sponge. You wake up sticking to your own skin. Once, in the torpedo room, you catch a whiff of something that makes you gag. Turns out it's your blanket. A musty fusion of mold, sweat, and something citrusy, maybe a tangerine died in there weeks ago. You fold it with one hand and sleep without it. Which just means now you're both cold and damp. Excellent. You fantasize about towels. About dry towels. About terracloth so absorbent it could change your life. You imagine walking barefoot on a sun-warmed rug. You start ranking your favorite types of dryness. Oven dryness. Desert dryness. That weird dry winter static that zaps your doorknob. You would sell your soul for a dehumidifier. And then there's your uniform. German wool. Supposed to be durable, practical, warm. It is all of those things. Also, itchy, thick, and completely unsuited to life in a mildew machine. You wear it until it clings to your shape like wet cardboard, and taking it off feels like peeling your own skin. Underneath? A sleeveless undershirt that smells like fear and onions. You remember the cook saying he stores bread near the engine room to keep it from molding. That's how humid it is. Bread rots faster if left in most parts of the boat. You can't even have a proper sandwich without worrying it might be growing something. Quirky fact: some crewmen grew actual mushrooms behind wall panels. Not on purpose. And no, they weren't the fun kind. Historians still debate whether ventilation improvements on later U-boat models made a meaningful difference. Some argue the upgraded airflow reduced illness and moisture buildup. Others claim it was too little, too late, and the boat still reeked like a gym locker on a cargo ship. One British POW aboard a captured U-boat described it as being stuck inside a boiled sock. And then it hits you, the salt. Not just from the ocean around you, but from your own sweat. It crusts on your collar. It cakes under your arms. You wipe your forehead and feel sandpaper. When you try to clean your face with a rag, you scrape it instead. There's no escape. Salt, damp, heat, it's a brine. You're slowly being pickled. The officers don't fare much better. Even the captain walks around with dark circles under his eyes and sweat rings the size of dinner plates. You see his socks hanging by the periscope one night. Not because they're special. Just because it's the driest part of the boat. The periscope station. Think about that. Eventually, you stop trying. You accept that you are now part marine animal. You embrace the wet. You make jokes about it, call yourself U-Boat Sushi or Captain Moistbeard. Laughter helps. Kind of. But there's always the reality: dampness here isn't a nuisance. It's a constant, like gravity or dread. And it's cumulative. The longer the patrol, the worse it gets. By the third week, there are corners of the boat no one ventures into unless they're desperate or lost. Your bunk smells like a seal died in it. You have mold spots on your cuffs. You think something is growing under your boot sole, but you're afraid to lift it and check. Still, you tell yourself it could be worse. You could be in the bilge room. Then one day, you're assigned to clean the bilge room. That's where condensation collects. Where spills go to die. Where oil, water, seawater, sewage, and who knows what else settle into a sour stew. You wade through it with a sponge and 1,000 regrets, trying not to slip. The damp here is alive. You swear it growls. By the time you finish, you are soaked to the knees in filth, and no amount of rubbing will get the smell off your hands. You sit back in your bunk, dripping, sighing, resigning. Another day, another battle with the damp. Eventually, the damp doesn't bother you as much. But that's only because now everything does. The noise. The hunger. The knowledge that you still have 10 days to go. And when you close your eyes, you dream of dry things, towels, sunlit porches, warm socks fresh from the dryer. Then you wake up, and your pillow sticks to your cheek. You're starving. Well, not literally, there's still food. Sort of. But you've already started lowering your expectations. At this point, even a dry cracker that doesn't fight back would feel like a gourmet event. Unfortunately, the reality is far more wriggly. You're 6 days into the patrol when you first notice the potatoes moving. At first, you think it's the light. A trick of shadows. But no, those are actual larvae, wriggling in the potato crate like they just paid rent. The cook shrugs when you point it out. Just cut out the bad parts, he says, already peeling a questionable spud with the dead-eyed efficiency of someone long past caring. You eat it anyway. What choice do you have? Food aboard a U-boat isn't planned with your comfort in mind. It's designed to last as long as possible, to occupy as little space as possible, and to offend as few noses as possible. It fails on all 3 counts. Your first few days at sea? Not so bad. Fresh bread, eggs, a little cured ham. But the fridge space is tiny, and by day 5, anything remotely perishable is gone or suspiciously slimy. The bread goes stale, then moldy. The eggs crack and ooze into the back of the cooler. The fresh fruit, what little there was, disappears faster than a torpedo in clear water. From there on out, it's a downhill culinary slide into canned meat, powdered soup, pickled vegetables, and whatever survived the initial loading scramble. And you do mean scramble. Provisioning a U-boat is a chaotic game of spatial Tetris. Every gap, drawer, and overhead hook is crammed with food. There are sausages swinging above your bunk like party decorations. One day you sit down and realize you've been leaning against a box of onions for 3 hours. Mainstream historical fact: German U-boats often stuffed their forward torpedo rooms with food, leaving the actual torpedoes stashed behind or above the supplies. This created an odd situation where sailors would have to shift crates of sauerkraut to reload weapons of war. Somewhere, there's a metaphor in that. You learn early not to ask what's in the stew. The answer is always stew, and the smell never matches the texture. Meat is often of the canned variety, with a gelatinous cap that quivers when poked. Once, someone finds a whole fish in a tin marked pork. The room is split between laughter and horror. You eat it anyway. Protein's protein. One sailor has a stash of chocolate. Real chocolate. He guards it like treasure, doling it out on birthdays or after particularly rough depth charge sessions. You trade your boots for a square of it, but he's not interested. He wants toothpaste. Toothpaste has become currency. So has instant coffee. So has anything with flavor that doesn't remind you of pickled beets. You hear rumors of a guy on another U-boat who brought hot sauce and became a legend. No one here thought of that. You look down at your grey soup and wish for Tabasco. Historians still argue whether U-boat food was better or worse than surface Navy fare. Some say it was more consistent, less chance for spoilage from the elements. Others argue that the lack of ventilation, refrigeration, and fresh anything made it an endurance test disguised as nourishment. Then there are the maggots. They come from the potatoes. Maybe from the onions. Who knows? But once they arrive, they don't leave. The cook tries to cut around them. Sometimes he doesn't bother. Protein, right? You try not to chew too slowly. The ship's cook, referred to as the smutyer, has the worst job on the boat. Not just because he works with dubious supplies, but because his galley is a coffin-sized closet located near the diesels. It's hot. It's loud. It's damp. He sweats constantly. His stove has the stability of a drunk baby deer. You watch him tie pots down with wire and rubber bands just to stop dinner from hurling itself across the room. Still, he manages. One night he makes pancakes from powdered egg and something he insists is flour. They're a little sour. You don't ask why. It's the best meal you've had all week. Quirky tidbit? U-boat crews sometimes got inventive with food waste. Coffee grounds were reused for scrubbing dishes. Cabbage leaves doubled as makeshift rags. One boat reportedly fermented fruit peels into a dubious kind of alcohol, which was then banned after 2 crewmen passed out in the torpedo room and nearly broke a valve. By now, your stomach has adapted to the routine: eat, regret, repeat. Hunger overrides revulsion. You learn to plug your nose, chew fast, and not think too hard about the texture. You dream about apples. Not even good apples, just boring, regular apples that don't make you gag. And yet, despite it all, mealtime becomes oddly sacred. The ritual of lining up for food, the clatter of metal trays, the warm weight of something, anything, in your hands, gives the day shape. People joke, tell stories, grunt appreciatively. The food may be terrible, but for a moment, it's shared. You even find yourself looking forward to the soup. Not because it's good, but because it's hot. One day, the cook announces a meatballs. You brace yourself. They're grayish-brown, slightly rubbery, and floating in a sauce that smells like tin. Still, it's different. And different is exciting. You eat 3. Later that night, someone mentions they were made from the last of the good cans. You don't ask what the bad cans look like. You keep eating, day after day, because you have to. Because in the tight, hungry rhythm of U-boat life, even a plate of maggoty potatoes is better than nothing. But you also know this, if you ever get home, you're never eating anything again. Not ever. Sleep? That's adorable. You quickly learn that aboard a World War II U-boat, sleep is not a gentle retreat. It's a negotiated truce between your aching body and an environment that seems specifically designed to keep you awake. You don't fall asleep so much as collapse into a brief blackout, if you're lucky. And if you're not? Well, get used to blinking at metal ceilings for hours, listening to the ghostly groans of the Atlantic. The day, or what passes for one, is split into watches. You're on for 4 hours, off for 4, around the clock. No weekends, no holidays, no I didn't sleep well last night, can I take it easy? It's a relentless grind. For on, for off, for on, for off. It's called roll and wash, or rolling watch, and it turns time into a mushy, meaningless stew. At first, your body fights it. You stumble through your shifts groggy and irritable, trying to drink the weak coffee the cook manages to brew with stale grounds and lukewarm water. You stretch your neck, blink through the engine's lullaby, and try not to fall asleep standing up. Everyone has their trick, pinching their thigh, tapping their foot, repeating multiplication tables in their head. You try all of them. Some nights, none work. Then your shift ends, and the real challenge begins. You head to your bunk, which may or may not be yours at the moment. U-boats use hot bunking. That means 3 people share 2 bunks, rotating in and out. You climb into a mattress still warm from someone else's body heat. It smells like sour wool, foot powder, and sadness. You try to sleep. But the engines. Oh, the engines. They're never off. Ever. The diesels when you're surfaced, the electrics when you're submerged. Either way, you're blanketed in mechanical humming, clanking, and the occasional, disconcerting clang. It's like trying to nap inside a washing machine filled with angry wasps. You roll onto your side. Bad idea. Now your elbow's digging into a rivet. You flip again. Now your face is mashed against a pipe that's suspiciously moist. Someone's sock is hanging above your head, slowly dripping. Quirky fact, some crewmen would hang their socks near sleeping bunks to dry them with body heat. Technically efficient. Psychologically scarring. Eventually, you start to drift off, and that's when the guy above you starts snoring. Loudly. Like he's doing engine impressions in his dreams. You throw a weak elbow at the bottom of his bunk, but he doesn't notice. He just keeps going. Rhythmic, nasal foghorn blasts right into your REM cycle. Then someone yells from the control room. A new course. A change in depth. You're jostled, woken again. A wrench clatters. Footsteps stomp past. The submarine groans as it adjusts pressure. You curl tighter into yourself, trying to find a dry, quiet corner of a mattress that hasn't been claimed by noise or mildew. Historians note that sleep deprivation aboard submarines was a silent enemy. The constant stress, the irregular shifts, the heat, the lack of ventilation, it all piled up. Crews were technically allowed rest time, but most only managed fragmented naps. Long, deep sleep? Mythical. A U-boat sailor who slept 5 hours straight might as well have discovered time travel. And if the physical conditions don't get you, your mind will. You start dreaming in metal, in valves and gauges and sonar pings. You wake up unsure if you just dreamed a depth charge or if it was real. You blink at the bunk ceiling, trying to remember what day it is. You think it might be Tuesday, or Wednesday, or both. At one point, someone forgets to wake you for your shift. When they find you 2 hours late, they're not angry, they're jealous. One crew member mutters, "I'd give a tow for 2 more hours." No one questions which tow. You start noticing things. That sailor over there? He hasn't stopped blinking in 30 minutes. Another guy accidentally pours coffee into a shoe instead of his cup. The officer of the watch drops his clipboard and takes 3 seconds too long to realize it. These are the little signs. The creeping cracks. The slow erosion of alertness that happens when sleep becomes a rumor. And the dreams, when you do sleep, start getting weird. You dream of open fields, of rain on grass, of bedsheets that don't smell like engine grease. You wake up disoriented, convinced you're back home. Then you roll over and hit your forehead on a steam pipe. Reality checks in. There's a fringe theory that sleep-deprived sailors became more emotionally volatile, not just cranky, but irrationally hopeful. Believing, for instance, that they saw land on the sonar when it was just a school of fish. One story tells of a crewman who woke up convinced he'd already finished the mission and packed his things to disembark, still at sea, 800 miles from port. They found him waiting by the hatch with his duffel and a comb. You learn to catch sleep whenever and wherever you can. Slumped over a crate. Propped in a corridor. Curled beneath the periscope. One night, you catch a 20-minute nap with your head resting on a potato sack and wake up feeling more refreshed than after 4 hours in your bunk. You stop caring where you sleep, only that you can. Sometimes, someone stands watch near the bunks just to monitor breathing. Not out of paranoia, but because people have been known to sleep so deeply that they stop responding. A gentle poke. A whisper. A confirmation that yes, you're still alive. That's sleep on a U-boat, something between hibernation and collapse. And even in those precious, stolen moments, rest is never restful. You're always alert, even when unconscious. Listening for that change in tone. That sudden silence that means the engine stopped. Or the distant boom that means someone's found you. You never sleep all the way down. Not really. And when your next watch begins, you rise from your bunk, eyes bloodshot, skin clammy, and legs stiff. You nod at the guy climbing in behind you, he's already half asleep. You splash cold water on your face. It doesn't help. But it's a ritual now. Another shift. Another nap. Another long blink toward exhaustion. Sleep? No. You don't sleep. You drift. You twitch. You doze in defense. Let's talk about the air. Not the oxygen, mind you, that's another horror story we'll get to, but the smell of it. The quality. The particular blend of fumes, sweat, and suffering that saturates every single breath you take aboard this floating saw pipe. You know how some places have a signature scent? A bakery smells like warm bread and flour. A library like old paper and quiet. A U-boat smells like socks that gave up on life weeks ago, combined with diesel fumes, sour wool, engine grease, fermented cabbage, unbrushed teeth, and a tragic hint of something human. You'd think you'd get used to it. You won't. You pass a crewmate in the corridor, one of the engineers, and he smells like boiled underwear. He probably thinks the same about you. There's no judgment here, only mutual resignation. You both stink. The entire ship stinks. The walls are sweating, the pipes are sweating, and frankly, you're sweating. Again. And it's not just sweat, it's the sweat of no escape. There are no showers. You heard rumors there might be, back in training. A little stall. A water tank. Maybe a pipe with a trickle. Nope. On board, washing consists of a damp cloth, a prayer, and maybe a splash of water from a coffee tin, if you can spare it. Quirky U-boat tradition, some crews did try to wash using alcohol rations, rubbing their hands or necks with schnapps. Not for hygiene. Just for the fleeting illusion of feeling slightly less sticky. One guy did it with vinegar. He was not invited to hang out again. You try to clean your face on the third day using a rag that smells like old stew. It doesn't work. You try to wash your armpits with a damp sock. A new low. You catch yourself sniffing yourself to see if you've gotten worse or if the stink is just leveling out. Bad news, it's worse. The hygiene problem isn't just unpleasant, it's a ticking health bomb. Historians have noted that infections, rashes, and fungal conditions were rampant aboard U-boats. The crew's armpits were battlegrounds. The soles of their feet, swampy war zones. Their groins? We won't talk about those, but let's just say there was a reason talcum powder was as valuable as gold. At night, the smell intensifies. The heat in the sub builds up, especially in the forward sections near the torpedo room, where a half-dozen bodies are packed into a space barely big enough for a family dinner table. Men snore, sweat, shift. The air grows heavier with every exhale. No one opens a hatch. You're hundreds of feet under the surface. So you breathe it in. All of it. And here's the fun twist, the U-boat's ventilation system actually circulates the air. Not purifies it. Not freshens it. Just swirls it around like some horrible aromatic ceiling fan, pushing everyone's skin flakes and foot fumes from bow to stern. At some point, your nose goes numb from the assault. Or your brain decides to stop interpreting smells for the sake of your sanity. Then the diesel fumes kick in. Whenever the boat surfaces and runs its diesel engines, the fumes slip into the hull. It's not intentional, it's just how things work. The smell of hot oil and burning fuel fills your nostrils, clings to your skin, coats your throat. You taste it hours later when you try to eat. It turns your teeth gritty. That guy who smokes near the engine room? You envy him. Not because he's cool, but because the cigarette smoke temporarily masks the smell of boiled sock and radiator fluid. You learn to open your mouth just so while breathing, trying to filter less of the air through your nose. It doesn't help. The taste seeps in, oily and persistent. You lie awake at night wondering if it's in your bloodstream now. Diesel DNA. Even your dreams smell. You remember a story a crewmate told about a guy who tied a perfumed handkerchief to the inside of his collar. A gift from a girl back home. By day 3, it smelled like onions and despair. He still wore it. Called it Lily. Some nights, he whispered to it like a lover. You laugh at first. Then, one night, you catch yourself sniffing your own sleeve because for 1 second it reminds you of soap. Not real soap. Imagined soap. Memory soap. Historians still debate whether U-boat crews developed a kind of shared olfactory immunity or simply went noseblind. The debate continues, probably because the only surviving veterans still remember the smell. And still flinch when they walk past the seafood section in a grocery store. One thing's certain, when the air gets really bad, it's time to worry. Because bad air means bad filters. Bad filters mean carbon dioxide buildup. And that means hallucinations, dizziness, nausea, and, if things go very wrong, unconsciousness. That's right. The stink isn't just annoying. It's dangerous. There's a moment, day 12, maybe 13, when you wake up with a start. The air is thick. You feel like you're breathing through a wet sock. Your tongue sticks to your teeth. You sit up, sweating. Around you, others are stirring. One guy groans. Another vomits quietly into a bucket. Someone is breathing too fast. The engineer shows up with a canister and starts adjusting valves. You hear gas release, a hiss of pressured air, as precious fresh oxygen floods into the space. And you breathe. Deeply. Thankfully. Desperately. It's the best air you've ever inhaled, even if it still smells like fried onions and despair. It won't last, of course. But for now, it's clean enough. So you get used to it. You accept that your skin feels sticky, your breath tastes like metal, and your clothes smell like they fought a tire fire and lost. You don't dream of fresh air anymore. You just want air that doesn't feel chewy. And when you finally surface, weeks later, with the hatches open and the night breeze pouring in, it hits you like a miracle. Real air. Cool. Fresh. Smelling faintly of salt and sky. You lean into it like a man reborn. You close your eyes. You breathe in, slowly. Deeply. And behind you, someone farts. Of course. Your world is shrinking. It was small to begin with, sure, just a steel tube floating under a few hundred feet of very angry ocean. But now it's smaller. You can feel the walls inching closer, the air getting thicker, your limbs brushing against bodies and bulkheads no matter how you shift. There is nowhere to stretch. Nowhere to be alone. Nowhere to simply exist without touching something or someone. Claustrophobia isn't just a possibility on a U-boat, it's practically a requirement. If you weren't mildly claustrophobic before, congratulations, now you are. The space between compartments is so tight that when two sailors pass, it's a softcore wrestling match. You find yourself saying sorry a dozen times just trying to get from your bunk to the control room. Sometimes, you don't even speak, you just exhale and sidle sideways like an apologetic crab. The ceiling is always too low. You learn to stoop, hunch, duck. Stand up too quickly, and the metal piping cracks you right in the skull. That's your third forehead bruise this week. One of them looks like it's becoming permanent. A shiny souvenir from the hydraulic pump by the periscope well. You think about standing up straight and realize you haven't done that in 9 days. Even lying down doesn't help. Your bunk has exactly 18 inches of headroom, less if you're in the upper rack, where pipes run like serpents across the ceiling. You can't sit up. You can't roll over without elbowing someone. You can't even fully extend your toes without jamming them against the bulkhead. You feel it in your chest sometimes, when the hatches are all sealed tight and the U-boat dives deep. A tightening. Like the air itself is pressing in, conspiring with the steel walls to compress your ribcage just a little more every hour. Historians still argue whether claustrophobia was widespread among U-boat crews or simply suppressed. After all, you couldn't exactly quit mid-patrol. No one wants to hear about your anxiety attack when depth charges are raining overhead. The official records say nothing. But the letters home, those that survived, tell quieter truths. It feels like living inside a coffin, one sailor wrote. Another described dreaming about wide-open fields and weeping when he woke up. Even simple movements require choreography. Want to get to the radio room? You wait for the cook to finish crouching by the sink, then squeeze past a sailor reading a tattered magazine, duck under two dangling sausages, and time your sidestep to avoid the guy coming from the torpedo bay. It's human Tetris. There are no corners to hide in. No privacy. You can't weep, whisper, stretch, or sulk without someone noticing. You once tried to have a moment to yourself near the electrical junction box, but within 5 minutes 2 other crewmen joined you, one just to change socks, the other because he liked the pipe sounds. One quirky coping strategy? Some sailors carved little nooks out of supply crates, tiny personal altars with letters, medals, or photos tucked inside. They'd sit beside them during off hours, pretending it was their own room. Others scratched names or drawings into the walls. You find one near the forward torpedo bay, a stick figure wearing a crown, captioned König der Roher, King of the Pipes. You nod in respect. But most of the time, you can't even daydream. You're too aware of every body near you. The smells. The breaths. The occasional elbow jabs when someone shifts in their sleep. One night, you wake up from a vivid dream of fields, wind, sunlight, only to find someone's foot in your face. You don't even flinch anymore. You just sigh and push it gently away. There's a moment, mid-patrol, when you completely lose your sense of direction. You swear the compartments have changed order. You walk toward the galley and end up in the radio room. Everything looks the same, curved steel, pipes, low lights, the same 3 faces cycling past you like background characters in a looped video game. You begin to forget what fresh air feels like, what clouds look like. You start measuring time in the number of socks hung up to dry. You overhear a whispered conversation near the aft battery room. One sailor admits he started hallucinating, seeing doors that weren't there, hearing birdsong in the vent fan. No one mocks him. Another quietly says, "Me too." It's the cabin fever. The steel enclosure squeezing your brain. You fantasize about space. Not the stars kind, just room. A room with corners. A ceiling taller than your head. A chair you can fully sit in. A window. Historians sometimes describe U-boats as iron coffins, a phrase coined by survivors who weren't trying to be poetic, they were being literal. This boat was designed for stealth and lethality, not livability. You're surrounded by 6-foot torpedoes that get more space than you do. Some days, you envy them. At least they have a clear job and a clean, air-conditioned tube to lie in. There's one day, maybe day 20, when you get into a minor shoving match trying to pass someone in the narrow gangway. It's not even personal. You just can't go anywhere without brushing past someone's arm, stomach, or rear end. You mutter an apology. They grunt back. Then you both laugh. What else can you do? The crew adapts, mostly. You develop passing etiquette. A glance means you go first. A shoulder pat means coming through. Everyone moves with practiced fluidity until someone new shows up, bumps into everything, and becomes the designated punching bag for a week. Eventually, the claustrophobia stops being an enemy. It becomes the atmosphere. The pressure in your ears. The rhythm of the ship. You don't beat it. You fold yourself into it. And one day, when the sub surfaces and you finally climb the conning tower ladder to breathe real air and see the vast open sky, you flinch. You squint at the sun like it's too much. Too wide. Too far away. You're not sure if it's a blessing or just another kind of prison. There's a sound that doesn't belong. At first, you can't quite place it, just a dull ping that cuts through the hum of the engines and the quiet rustle of card games and pipework. Then it repeats. Regular. Mechanical. Cold. Ping, ping, ping. Every head lifts. Every conversation dies mid-sentence. You're being hunted. The sonar pulses come from above, somewhere in the water column, echoing off your steel hull. They travel straight through your bones, these sounds. Clean and unnatural. A call and response that you never get to answer. It's the enemy saying, "I know you're out there," while you say nothing at all. A British destroyer, maybe two, circling above you now, dropping those pulses into the deep, fishing for your shape in the dark. Your heart speeds up. Not like panic. Not yet. But alert. Hyper-aware. You can feel your pulse in your teeth. The men around you stop moving, as if sheer stillness might make you invisible. And then it comes, the soft, urgent command from the control room. Silent running. You've heard those words before. This time, they hit harder. Everything stops. The engines are dialed down until they're barely humming. No one speaks. No one coughs. The cook freezes mid-stir. Someone's about to sneeze and clamps their nose shut. A crew member walking back from the head freezes mid-step and just stays there, balanced like a heron, afraid even his footfall might betray you. And above, the ping continues. Historians still argue whether U-boat silent running was truly effective against increasingly sophisticated Allied sonar systems. Some believe the tactic only delayed detection. Others suggest that the discipline and training of the crew made all the difference, that holding their breath for just a few extra seconds saved their lives more than once. You believe it now. One slip could be the end. A dropped spanner, a loose pan lid, even a sneeze, and the sonar operator up there hears it, pinpoints it, and then come the charges. Depth charges, dozens at once, calibrated to detonate near your depth, trying to break your hull, or at least your spirit. There's a fringe story passed around by veterans, probably exaggerated, possibly true, about a sailor who coughed during silent running. Just once. The boat was detected. They survived, barely, but the captain never forgave him. The man spent the rest of the patrol confined near the bilge, mopping condensation. No one spoke to him. He never sailed again. And you? You're holding your breath. You haven't realized it yet, but your chest is tight. Your muscles ache from stillness. You're afraid to shift your weight on the bench. The sonar pings again. It's louder this time. Closer. You wonder if they've locked onto you. You think of the hull, just a few inches of steel separating you from the sea, and from pressure that could crush you like a beer can. Somewhere aft, a valve hisses. Quiet, but loud enough. The officer of the watch snaps his head toward the sound. Everyone freezes harder. Then the destroyer shifts. The ping fades. Another one starts up farther away. You've become a shadow again. But the silence doesn't lift. Not yet. Silent running can last hours. No one says this out loud. But everyone knows. You'll stay quiet until the boat's safe. That means no talking. No clinking cups. No cards. No shuffling crates. Your knees ache. You haven't moved in 30 minutes. You swear your ear is pressed against something that's sweating. Or maybe you're sweating. Either way, you're becoming part of the wall. Eventually, someone signals. A soft hand gesture from the executive officer. Ease off. You hear the engines rise just a touch. Barely audible, but the relief is palpable. Everyone exhales. You don't even realize how close you were to braking until your hand starts shaking. You look down, thinking maybe you're cold. But no. It's adrenaline. Your body just finished a marathon without moving an inch. The captain emerges from the conning tower, face blank. That's his job. No fear. No tension. Just the calm presence of someone you can pretend is in control of everything. He nods once. You nod back, even though you did absolutely nothing to help. Still, you survived another dance with death. This won't be the last one. Quirky footnote: sailors developed codes for silence. A finger to the nose meant hold it. 2 taps on the wall meant safe to breathe. If someone needed to move in an emergency, they used hand gestures like underwater dancers. It looked ridiculous. But it worked. After the all clear, the boat stirs back to life. The card game resumes. Someone opens a tin of bread. The cook bangs his pot with a spoon just to feel heard. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because your body needs the release. You wonder what the destroyer's crew looks like right now. Did they know how close they came? Were they sipping tea as they dropped explosives over your head? Were they young? Did any of them suspect that a metal ghost was hovering just beneath them, packed with 50 unwashed men praying not to sneeze? You'll never know. But you'll remember that sound. Ping. The sound that meant death might be only a few meters away. The sound that froze 50 men in place. The sound that taught you, for the first time, that silence can be deafening. You learn very quickly that there's no democracy on a U-boat. This is not a place of casual suggestion or collaborative brainstorming. You don't get to raise your hand and vote on whether to dive or surface, or what course to take, or whether you should fire a torpedo. There is a man who decides these things. He wears a cap with a white top, speaks softly, and when he points, 50 men obey without hesitation. The captain. You don't call him by his first name. You barely call him anything at all unless spoken to. And if you do, it's Herr Kalun, short for Captain Lieutenant. In English terms, that's somewhere between a senior lieutenant and a minor deity. The captain of a U-boat is absolute authority. He decides when you dive, when you surface, and how close you get to danger. He decides when to run silent, when to attack, and when to press forward into waters so thick with enemy destroyers they might as well be paved. And the crew? You follow. Not because he's always right, but because he's the only one with the burden of being allowed to be wrong. You watch him, this man who doesn't sleep much, who stands in the conning tower longer than anyone, who drinks his coffee black and cold and stares through the periscope like it's whispering secrets. His face rarely changes. You can't tell if he's afraid, or bored, or remembering his wedding. Sometimes you think he's asleep with his eyes open. But when he speaks, it cuts through everything. Periscope depth. Surface, engines full. Torpedo, loss. 3 words, maybe 4, and the whole boat shifts. You've heard tales about mad captains, men who ordered attacks on heavily guarded convoys just to earn another medal, or who refused to surface even when half the crew had heat stroke. Historians still argue whether these were acts of courage or madness. Some commanders became legends. Others became cautionary tales whispered in dockside taverns. One particularly famous Kalun once spent an entire patrol talking to a mannequin head he'd named Brigitte. Crew said he made better decisions than most sane men. You're not sure where your captain falls on that spectrum. So far, he hasn't spoken to any inanimate objects. But you've noticed he chews the same piece of licorice for days, never actually eating it. When someone asks why, he just says, keeps the nerves busy. One day, during a tense moment of silent running, he orders a sudden course change. No explanation. Just a sharp 2 degrees starboard. Dive 20 meters. The helmsman hesitates for half a second, not out of disobedience, but out of confusion. Then he obeys. 30 seconds later, a depth charge detonates where you would have been. No one says anything, but the look they give the captain is reverent. Not grateful. Reverent. It's not all glory, though. Command on a U-boat is isolation wrapped in pressure. The captain can't confide in the crew. Can't show doubt. Can't say, I'm tired, or I don't know if we'll make it. He has to be stone. You see it one night when he thinks no one's watching, just a second, while he rubs his forehead and closes his eyes. Then it's gone. He's back. Solid. Indestructible. At least on the outside. There are rules. Layers of hierarchy. The Obersteuermann, or chief helmsman, controls navigation. The Funkmart handles radio. The Maschinenmart watches over the engines like they're his children. But they all report up. The chain ends with one man. And even he's not truly free. Every few days, he receives coded messages from command. Orders. New patrol zones. Intel updates. Most messages are vague. Some are borderline suicidal. Intercept convoy SC-122. Heavy escort presence. Translation: go find the biggest, angriest group of Allied ships and see if you can poke one without dying. He reads the messages, swears quietly in Swabian German, and folds them into his pocket like unwanted fortunes. You begin to understand, command doesn't mean control. It means responsibility for whatever happens when control slips away. And it does. Once, during a stormy surface run, the U-boat takes a sharp roll. A crewman is thrown against the rail. Not badly hurt, but shaken. The captain helps him up, steadies him, says nothing. But later, you see him alone, writing in the logbook. His face tight. That roll wasn't his fault, but it was still his. There's a quirky story the cook tells about a captain who carried a violin. Not to play. Just to hold. He said it helped him think. The cook smiles and adds, he never made it back. No one laughs. Not because it's sad, but because it feels expected. Like U-boat captains are gods with expiration dates. Historians often highlight the unusually close bond between U-boat crews and their commanders. Unlike other naval ships, there's no officer's mess, no distant bridge. The captain lives among the men, sleeps in the same stink, eats the same grey stew. He is with you. All the time. And somehow, apart. You start to watch him the way sailors once watched stars. For signs. For direction. For reassurance that someone, somewhere, knows what they're doing. And when he gives the order to dive in enemy waters, your stomach drops, but your body moves. You're not brave. You're just following. Because down here, bravery is obeying someone who has every reason to be just as scared as you are. Boredom is its own kind of enemy. You think the terror will be the worst part of U-boat life, the depth charges, the suffocating air, the constant risk of implosion, but you're wrong. It's the hours between those moments that really get you. The long, yawning stretches of nothing. You sit. You wait. You lean against the same pipe for the 12th time in a day and try to remember if it's Tuesday or Thursday. You fail. You play a game of cards for the 17th time in 3 days. You lose again. When you're not in mortal danger, you are in stasis. The boat hums along, silent but alive, crawling beneath the surface at a snail's pace. Days blur. Watches overlap. You forget which shift you're on. You stop caring. The clock ticks, but it's ticking just to taunt you. You find yourself staring at dials, watching the depth gauge as if it might change out of sheer boredom. You watch a bead of condensation crawl down a bulkhead and take bets with yourself on how long it'll take to reach the floor. It's slow. You lose. One of the sailors invents a game with a pencil and a crate lid. He draws a grid and flicks the pencil across it, trying to land in certain squares. Another sailor joins in. Before long, 4 people are crouched around it like it's the World Cup. You join. You flick. You miss. You play again. For an hour. Quirky fact, many U-boat sailors brought little distractions: books, harmonicas, chess sets, even hand-knitted finger puppets. Yes, finger puppets. One officer reportedly staged silent puppet shows during long dives to keep morale up. Another made a mini-theater out of a box of sardines. You laugh when you first hear it, then you realize you'd pay good money to see one right now. You try reading, but the lighting's poor and the motion of the boat makes your stomach churn. You try writing, but all your letters home sound the same: still alive. Still damp. Still bored out of my skull. Eventually, you give up and just draw cartoons of your bunkmate's ridiculous feat. He adds a speech bubble. The drawing turns into a 4-panel comic. You have a series now. Historians still argue whether boredom contributed more to combat fatigue than actual battle stress. There's something uniquely corrosive about having nothing to do for hours, days, weeks, while also knowing that death could arrive at any second. You are stuck between panic and purgatory. You can't relax, but you also can't act. You start to notice patterns. The way the radio operator scratches his nose every 7 minutes. The exact number of rivets above your bunk, 63. The flicker in the ceiling light that happens when the depth changes. You track it all like it matters. Because it's something. One guy starts carving tally marks into the wall. At first, he's counting days. Then meals. Then, you're not sure. No one asks. When he stops, no one mentions it. Sometimes, you just sit and stare. Not because you're thinking. Because you've run out of thoughts. You've played every memory. Repeated every joke. Imagined every possible outcome for this patrol: surrender, victory, implosion. None of them seem real anymore. The radio crackles. For a second, there's a voice. You all lean in. It's static. False alarm. Back to staring at the wall. Your mind starts to go strange places. You wonder what it would feel like to open the hatch and let the ocean in. Just for a second. Just to break the monotony. You're not suicidal. You're just curious. You shake it off. You tie your boots. You ready them. It takes 15 minutes longer than it should. But it's something to do. One sailor rewrites a nursery rhyme to make it about torpedoes. Another tries to teach the rat in the supply hold to fetch a cracker. You all name the rat. It becomes the unofficial mascot. You consider promoting it to morale officer. And when the alarm does sound, when a sonar ping breaks the silence or a bearing change rattles the deck, your heart leaps. You're terrified. But also grateful. Because finally, something is happening. Something real. Something that matters. It's a sick twist. You begin to crave the danger because it breaks the boredom. Panic becomes entertainment. Fear, a perverse relief. And when that moment passes and the silence returns, you slump back down. Resume your stare. Back to the same pipe. The same deck plate. The same stale joke someone scribbled above the hatch in export hell. No shore leave. The boredom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles. Like dust. Like mildew. Like another layer of damp. And slowly, it becomes part of you. You hear the hiss first. Then a pop. Then silence, far worse than any noise. Because in a U-boat, silence from the wrong part of the ship means something just went wrong. Catastrophically wrong. You look up. The gauge on the wall, one you've been pretending not to notice for the past hour, has stopped twitching. It's frozen. So is everyone else. A valve blew. Somewhere. You don't know which one. You don't want to know. Because if it's the wrong valve, the one that controls the air pressure or cooling system or ballast or, God forbid, a torpedo launch tube, it means someone has to go fix it. And if it's you, well, congratulations. You're now a volunteer for mechanical roulette. On the surface, U-boats were symbols of German engineering. Beneath the waves? They were barely contained entropy. A tangle of pipes, tanks, compressors, pistons, and pressurized dreams, all relying on one another to stay in perfect sync. When one part fails, the rest follow like dominoes. You move carefully through the corridor, stepping over slumped sailors and cans of food lashed to the overhead. Your boots clank once. The officer of the watch gives you a look. You slow down. You reach the machinery space. It's hot. Always is. The air is thick with oil and rust. You duck under a beam and squint at the gauges. Something's leaking, a fine mist of seawater spraying from a gasket, shimmering in the light. Someone's already there, wrench in hand, muttering to himself like a man trying to reason with a vengeful ghost. He looks up. Help me hold this. You do. He grunts, tightens the fitting. The mist slows. You hold your breath. The pressure equalizes. For now. You've avoided disaster. This time. Historians report that mechanical failures were one of the most common causes of U-boat deaths, more than torpedoes, more than depth charges. Because while the Allies might have hunted you from above, the boat itself could betray you from within. Pumps seized. Ballast tanks jammed. Hatch seals degraded. Batteries leaked. Oh, the batteries. Let's talk about those. A Type 7 U-boat runs on diesel engines when surfaced, but underwater it relies entirely on battery power. Massive lead-acid batteries stored under the deck plates. They're heavy, fragile, and temperamental, especially when submerged for days at a time. And when they fail, the boat becomes a tomb. You remember a story one of the engineers told, in a whisper. A boat from the 7th Flotilla took minor depth charge damage, just enough to crack one of the battery cells. The seawater leaked in, mixed with the acid, and created chlorine gas. Silent. Invisible. Lethal. They didn't even know what was happening at first, just sudden coughing, men collapsing. They had to surface under fire, tear open the hatches, drag half the crew onto the deck. 4 men died. Not from shrapnel. From breathing. Now, every time you smell something new, you panic. And you're always smelling something new. Another sailor, older, more seasoned, shows you the sound map. It's a mental chart every U-boat crewman keeps in his head. What the boat should sound like. The rhythm of the diesels. The groan of the dive planes. The tick of the relay near the sonar station. When something changes, even slightly, your ears notice before your eyes can confirm it. Quirky superstition? Some crewmen wore charms for mechanical luck. One sailor carried a tiny brass gear from an old clock, claiming it kept his timing clean. Another sewed a button from his civilian coat into his uniform, saying, "Steel doesn't fail people, it's the people who fail the steel." You try not to become paranoid. But you also find yourself listening more closely. You check the battery vents twice a day now. You tap your knuckle against pipes just to feel the vibration. You press your ear to bulkheads and wait. Wait for something to break. Because it will. Historians still debate whether German engineering truly held up under wartime pressure. Early U-boats were marvels, yes, but as the war dragged on, materials thinned, shortcuts were taken, factories rushed production. What was once precision became improvisation. Some U-boats left port with missing parts or half-tested systems. Some never returned, and no one ever found out why. One night, while writing a letter you'll never send, the lights flicker. Just for a moment. But long enough to remind you how thin the line is between operational and buried in the sea. You write a little faster. There are days when everything seems fine. The engines hum along. The periscope raises without a hitch. The air scrubbers work. And then, clang, a bolt pops loose from the ceiling and bounces off someone's head. Just the ship saying hello, someone jokes. No one laughs. Later, the same guy checks the coolant pump for the 8th time. His hands are shaking. And when the alarm bell rings again, not for enemy ships, but for technical issue, forward compartments, you don't even panic. You just grab your wrench and go. Because on a U-boat, you fight two wars, the one outside, and the one humming through every pipe, seal, and wire inside the beast. And sometimes, the beast bites. You don't look like yourself anymore. It starts subtly. Your uniform doesn't sit the same on your shoulders, your socks leave angry bands around your ankles, and your hair's developed a life of its own. But soon your skin begins to revolt. Not metaphorically. Literally. You wake one morning with an itchy patch behind your knee. You scratch it. It bleeds a little. No big deal. But by evening, it's red, angry, and has a small blister. You ask the corpsman, who shrugs and hands you a tin of zinc salve that smells like regret and mint. "Keep it dry," he says, deadpan. You laugh. You can't help it. Dry? On a U-boat? Within days, more spots appear, on your elbows, the backs of your thighs, your chest. They itch. They flake. They weep. And no matter how much talcum powder you apply, how carefully you avoid the dampest corners, your body keeps fighting you. Welcome to the world of U-boat dermatology. Historians have recorded a laundry list of skin conditions that plagued submariners: heat rashes, contact dermatitis, trench foot, boils, fungal infections, and lice infestations, to name just a few. The tight quarters, combined with wet wool uniforms and zero access to proper hygiene, created the perfect petri dish. You are the petri dish. And it's not just you. Look around and you'll notice it. The sailor who winces every time he sits down, that boil on his lower back is the size of a walnut. The guy who scratches behind his ear so frequently you think he's trying to signal Morse code. The officer who hasn't taken off his boots in 3 days because he's afraid what's happening underneath them. Let's talk about the feet. Your feet, once proud and calloused from honest work, are now squishy sponges. The socks are never fully dry. The boots are soaked in engine room sweat. And no matter how often you swap out the newspaper liners, you do swap them, right? Your soles feel like old bread left in a damp cupboard. And when you peel your socks off after a long watch, your skin comes with them. You've got the early signs of trench foot, red patches, numbness, slight swelling. The corpsman tells you to elevate your feet when you sleep. You sleep in a bunk the size of a laundry basket. There's no elevation unless you levitate. A quirky tidbit: some U-boat crews tried using engine grease to waterproof their socks. Others swore by rubbing raw onions into their boots to kill bacteria. One sailor, legendary on his boat, used schnapps as a foot soak. He got trench foot anyway, but claimed his feet died happily. You discover lice around day 17. It's the itch at first. Then the crawling. You tug your undershirt down and find tiny, unwanted stowaways nesting in the seams. You flick one off your shoulder, then two more from your collar. You try to stay calm. You fail. Soon, everyone's itching. The whole boat becomes a scratching chorus. Shoulders twitch. Necks shift. Conversations trail off mid-sentence as someone pauses to dig at their waistline. The corpsman sighs and opens the tin marked delousing powder. You line up. He dusts you like a baker sprinkling flour over doomed dough. It helps. Briefly. One guy shaves his entire body. Says he won't be a host for vermin. He emerges pale and bumpy, like a plucked chicken. But he smiles. You envy him. Then you notice he used the last of the razors. Your fingernails turn dark from grime. Your scalp flakes. You develop a patch of rough skin on your forearm that looks suspiciously like it might be growing moss. You're becoming less human, more submarine-shaped. Historians still argue whether the health decline aboard U-boats had a direct impact on crew performance. Some say it lowered morale, slowed reaction time, even caused fatal mistakes. Others believe the crew simply adapted, viewing the decay of their bodies as just another sacrifice in service of the war. You're not sure what you believe. But you do know that you've started thinking of your rash as a separate entity. You've named it Wilhelm. It keeps you company during long watches. You find yourself talking to it. You don't tell anyone. You dream of hot baths. Of clean towels. Of that satisfying burn when soap hits a cut. You'd sell your boots for a bar of real soap. You fantasize about shampoo. Not fancy stuff. Just anything that doesn't double as engine degreaser. One night, someone opens a tin from their care package, soap from home. Real soap. Lavender, by the smell. The entire control room freezes. Someone whispers, "Is that flowers?" He guards the soap like a talisman, rubbing it on his wrists just to remember what good smells feel like. You stare, longingly. Eventually, you stop checking the mirror, such as it is, a scrap of polished steel in the engine room. What's the point? Your skin is blotchy. Your eyes are sunken. Your cheeks are hollow. You look like someone who's halfway through turning into a leather satchel. You still scratch, of course. The body doesn't forget. But you stop complaining. Everyone does. Because the scratching means you're alive. The stinging? Alive. The peeling? Very much alive. Dead men don't itch. So you rub on the salve. You pat your feet dry with a scrap of cloth. You scratch discreetly during briefings. And when the lights dim and the boat hums low, you whisper to Wilhelm, "Not today." And Wilhelm doesn't answer. Yet. You miss home. You don't say it out loud, no one does. But it hangs in the air like the stale scent of the last hot meal you had back in port. You find yourself thinking about it in quiet moments, the squeak of your mother's kitchen faucet, the worn edge of your father's coat, the way the dog used to bark at trains. All little things. Mundane. But now they feel like pieces of a different lifetime. And the worst part? You have no idea if home still exists. Once the U-boat leaves port, you are completely cut off. There's no radio contact, no letters, no news, unless you happen to catch an Allied broadcast through static, which you're not supposed to listen to anyway. You don't know who's winning the war. You don't know if your town has been bombed. You don't know if your sister got married, if your father's store is still open, or if your house is just a pile of rubble now. The silence is oppressive. Every sailor writes letters while in port, of course. You remember yours, scribbled on stiff stationery, corners bent from sweat and nerves. You tried to sound brave. You said things like, "Don't worry about me, and we'll be back before the leaves fall." You tucked it into a mail sack like a secret, hoping it would reach the right hands. But once you leave, there's nothing coming the other way. Mail doesn't get delivered underwater. Historians have noted how isolating U-boat service was, even compared to other branches. Soldiers at the front often had field mail, occasional telegrams. Surface sailors could catch a message in port. But U-boat crews? Nothing. Total silence. Days turned into weeks without any news from home, good or bad. One sailor on your boat had a fiancée. Wrote to her every day of his last patrol. Read her letters so often they disintegrated at the folds. This time, he carries a photo. He hasn't looked at it since day 5. You think it hurts too much. You overhear him mumble once in his sleep, "Don't wait too long." You pretend you didn't hear. You have dreams, too. Vivid ones. You're back in your neighborhood. You smell warm bread, hear the clang of bicycles, see laundry flapping in the sun. You feel sunlight. Actual sunlight. Not the pale, cold gleam that leaks through the conning tower hatch. But real, burning, stinging daylight. And then you wake up. And you're surrounded by 50 men who look like death wearing damp pajamas. The dreams are always worse after torpedo strikes. You felt the rush of the chase, the thrill of a successful hit, but it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like erasure. You remember the ship vanishing into the sea, and you wonder, was someone like you on board? Writing letters? Dreaming of home? One of the more fringe stories passed around U-boat circles is about a sailor who received a letter mid-patrol via coded message his father had died. No explanation how the message got through. Some say it was a high-level pass-through, others swear it was an enemy broadcast intercepted by mistake. The sailor didn't speak for 3 days. Then he asked to be transferred to the battery room and never came out during daylight hours again. They said he was listening for the dead in the electric hum. And then there's the birthdays. The anniversaries. The dates that roll past with a whisper. No one celebrates birthdays on board. You don't even mention them. Someone might smuggle a cigarette or a saved candy ration to mark the occasion, but there's no cake, no songs. Only a brief, quiet nod. One more year alive. One more year away. Quirky fact, some crews had morale logs, unofficial books where sailors would doodle, write poetry, or keep calendars of home events. Your boat has won, hidden under a panel in the galley. The entries are uneven. One reads, "Today would have been her wedding day." Another simply says, "June, I think." Time itself slips away. The sun is a stranger. Days and nights blend into a droning grey eternity. Someone tries to mark the days with chalk on a wall. The chalk breaks. No one replaces it. You start measuring time in socks. How many times you've swapped them. How many meals you've had since the last time you shaved. You stopped shaving on day 12. You count how many dreams you've had about that street corner near your old school. 11, so far. You think. Historians still debate whether the isolation of U-boat crews led to stronger cohesion or increased mental strain. The answer is probably both. You do feel close to the crew. You know every twitch of the engineer's face, every groan the cook makes when the stove misfires. You could draw the radio man's knuckles from memory. But you also feel more alone than you ever have. Because no one here is from your home. No one here knows what your town smells like in spring, or what your mother's voice sounds like when she's trying not to cry. You try to tell a story once, a dumb one, about your neighbor's goat, and halfway through you trail off. No one gets it. And suddenly it feels so far away, so impossibly distant. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't exist anymore. You'll find out when, or if, you make it back. Until then, you keep that one small photo in your pocket. You don't look at it often. Just enough to remind yourself that something real exists beyond the steel, the stink, the silence. And when you close your eyes, you try to remember what it felt like to open a mailbox. Your nerves are shot. Not in a dramatic, hand-waving, theatre sort of way, are more like a wire stretched too tight, humming just below the threshold of snapping. Every breath you take feels like it might be the one before something happens. Or nothing happens. Both possibilities feel equally dangerous. You've seen men panic before. Surface sailors during storms, infantry freezing under fire. But what happens in the belly of a U-boat is quieter. Stranger. It doesn't burst out, it settles in. A slow calcification of the soul. 1 minute you're fine, brushing your teeth with stale water and a toothbrush that's slowly losing its bristles. The next, you're staring into the mirror, well, the warped bit of shiny pipe someone mounted near the engine room, and you barely recognize your own eyes. They're hollow. There's no sound of gunfire here, no flurry of action like in the movies. What gets you is the waiting. The endless, buzzing uncertainty. Is that sonar ping real? Was that creak from the hull expanding, or failing? Did the captain just pause a second too long before giving the order to dive? You start listening for cracks that aren't there. You tap your fingers without realizing. You jump at your own shadow when the lighting flickers. Historians have called it a war of nerves, and they're not being poetic. U-boat life is psychological trench warfare, except the trench moves, hums, and sometimes leaks. The real battle is not always above with the enemy, it's inside. A few days ago, the radio operator, Keller, quiet guy, always humming, stopped eating. No explanation. Just pushed his food around the plate, chewed on the edge of a spoon, and stared into space like he was trying to calculate how many molecules of air were left in the boat. Then he asked, calmly, "Do you think we'll ever actually see land again, or did we just dream it?" Nobody laughed. He's back to eating now. Sort of. But his humming stopped. One of the veterans tells you this is normal. He calls it the drift. Says it hits everyone at some point. Not all at once. It creeps in sideways, through fatigue, monotony, and the low, dull fear that builds like pressure in your ears. You try to fight it with routine. You shine your boots, even though no one cares. You fold your shirt a little neater. You help the machinist sort bolts, M12S from M10S. It doesn't matter, but it helps. You need to do something. Then come the dreams. You're back in the torpedo room. Only it's full of water. You can breathe underwater, somehow, but the others can't. They float, unmoving. Their eyes open. They stare at you like it's your fault. You wake up sweating. Or worse, you dream you're already home. Your mother stirring soup, the radio playing some cheerful waltz. You hear birds. Sunshine is pouring through the window. You smell flowers. Then you wake up and smell feet. Again. Quirky tradition, some U-boat sailors drew faces on the wall in grease pencil. Not art, just little faces, sometimes cartoonish, sometimes disturbingly realistic. They'd talk to them on long patrols. One was nicknamed Carl. Another had a full name and a backstory, Otto, the retired baker from Dresden. No one found this unusual. There's a makeshift quiet corner behind the battery room. Not official. Just a place where crewmen go when it's all too much. You don't cry there. You just sit. Maybe breathe slower. Maybe mumble a prayer. No one bothers you there. It's a kind of unspoken ceasefire for your sanity. The captain knows. Of course he does. He says nothing, but one day, you see him standing outside the corner, back to the wall, arms crossed. Not eavesdropping. Just making sure no one falls off the edge. Historians still argue whether the psychological strain of U-boat duty was underestimated by command. They trained crews for endurance, yes, but not for silence, for isolation, for the eerie stillness between sonar pings. The Royal Navy may have used depth charges, but the Kriegsmarine's worst weapon may have been a clipboard with too many patrol orders and not enough rest. One sailor once whispered, "The ocean wants us to go mad before it drowns us." He smiled when he said it. But his eyes didn't. You try to keep your sense of humor. It helps, sometimes. You laugh when someone accidentally sits on a pickle jar. You join in when someone improvises a sea shanty using nothing but spoons and an empty food tin. It keeps you human. But there are days when laughter feels like a betrayal. When everything is too much. When the thought of another shift, another stale meal, another hour listening to the whole creak, makes your chest tighten. You sit in the galley, staring into a cup of cold ersatz coffee, and try to remember your own handwriting. You try to recall what your father's voice sounds like. You try not to think about the fact that you're talking less every day. And when someone finally breaks, when a man bolts upright during a dive and screams that the walls are shrinking, you don't judge him. You just help hold him down. You wipe his forehead. You whisper, "You're okay." Even if you don't believe it. You don't survive this with strength. You survive it by folding in on yourself just enough to fit through another watch, another dive, another dream. You compress your fear into a knot and tuck it somewhere below your ribs. That knot grows. Slowly. Quietly. Just like the sea. It starts with a smell you haven't smelled before. Which is saying something, because you've smelled everything in this boat. Diesel. Mold. Sweat. Socks. Pickled beets. But this? This is different. Faint. Sweet. Almost. And then suddenly not. It takes a few seconds before it hits you fully. Not just the scent, but the understanding. Someone has died. It doesn't happen in a blaze of glory. There's no dramatic last stand. No enemy fire. Just a quiet slipping away. He was old, by U-boat standards, 32, maybe, and had been coughing for days. Everyone assumed it was the usual, moldy lungs, stale air, bad luck. Then one morning, during breakfast, he didn't wake up. The corpsman confirmed it quickly, solemnly. He's gone. No one says much. There's nothing to say. He didn't scream. He didn't flail. He just went still, like a light bulb that quietly burns out and leaves the room darker without anyone noticing at first. Now comes the problem. You're at sea. Weeks from port. There's no deck to lay him out on. No, I'll bring out your dead procedure. Just steel. Pipes. Compartments. And 50 men who still need to eat, sleep, move, and breathe in a very finite amount of space. There's nowhere to put the body. Some U-boats, in extreme cases, had procedures, burial at sea, quick and discreet. But only under the right conditions, calm seas, surfaced boat, and most importantly, time. You don't have any of that. You're running submerged and deep. There's a destroyer 2 zones over. There is no surfacing today. So the body stays. Wrapped in a blanket, he's moved to the aft torpedo compartment. Not because it's respectful. Because it's the only space left that isn't already filled with food crates, spare parts, or sleeping men. 2 sailors secure him with straps, so he doesn't shift if the boat takes a hard dive. The quiet clinking of metal against blanket is the only sound. Quirky, horrible fact, some U-boat crews, during long patrols, stored bodies in the freezer if one existed, next to meat, if necessary. On boats without such a luxury, corpses were kept wrapped and moved as needed, sometimes bunking next to the living. One sailor wrote that he once slept shoulder to shoulder with death for 2 nights. You now understand what he meant. At first, everyone avoids the compartment. Then they adapt. They have to. There are torpedoes to prep, pressure checks to make. You learn to work around the body like it's another piece of machinery. A silent crewmate, stiff and still. But the smell. It's subtle at first. Then persistent. It's sweet and rotting, clinging to the damp air. You tie a rag around your face. Doesn't help. Nothing does. The smell follows you. Into the control room. Into your dreams. You try to eat and can't. You try to sleep and dream you're being buried alive. You start to count the hours since he died. Not out of respect. Out of logistics. How much longer until you have to surface? Until it's too late to bury him in the sea and too horrifying to keep him inside? Historians still debate how often this happened. Official logs rarely recorded deaths aboard U-boats unless they occurred during action. Accidents, illness, psychological breaks leading to suicide, they were sometimes erased for morale. But among survivors, the stories crop up, always in hushed tones. We had a man die on day 18. We couldn't bury him until day 27. You feel it creeping in, the way silence spreads after a joke falls flat. The way your crewmates won't meet each other's eyes as easily. You all become quieter. You move slower. Conversations are clipped. The cook burns a batch of stew, and no one complains. He was one of the quiet ones. You remember now. Read a lot. Fixed his own boots. Hummed when he scrubbed the torpedo tubes. His bunk is still made up, blanket folded with painful precision. No one touches it. You start to realize how fragile this life really is. One bad cough. One infection. One mistake with the valves. And you become part of the boat in a way you never wanted to. The captain doesn't talk about it. He makes a mark in the logbook. That's all. You wonder what he writes. A name? A time? Or just one KIA to keep things simple? You find yourself talking less, thinking more. About your own body. How easy it would be to fade out. To go unnoticed until someone shakes you and realizes your skin is cold. You try to stay active. Keep your thoughts moving faster than your fears. You clean. You volunteer for extra watch. You organize the mess tin cabinet. One guy gets desperate enough to swap beds just for a change of smell. Then, one night, 2, maybe 3 days later, the order comes. Surface. The sea is rough. Wind snarls across the deck. But you climb out anyway, blinking into the dark, salt spray slapping your face like a baptism. 2 men bring the wrapped figure up the hatch. They don't say a word. Neither do you. The body is laid gently on the deck. A weighted bag is attached. There's a prayer mumbled. Or maybe just a name. Then, over the side. Gone. The waves swallow him whole. You stare at the spot for a while. You go back below. The smell lingers, faint but stubborn, like a memory that won't leave. It'll fade. The sea will scrub it away eventually. But for now, it haunts the corridors like a whisper. You lie in your bunk that night and wonder who'll do the same for you. You're damned if you do, and damned if you don't. That's what it comes down to. Submerged or surfaced, either way, you're in danger. There's no safe on a U-boat. Only choices. Calculated risks. Trade one death for another and hope you're fast enough to beat both. Submerged, you're invisible. Or mostly. You can slip under convoys, sneak past patrols, lurk in the shadowy depths like a predator in wait. But there's a catch. Always a catch. Every second you stay below, you burn battery power. And batteries mean air. No fresh intake, no exhaust. Just the same stale, recycled oxygen spinning around in tighter and tighter circles. Eventually, the CO builds up. You breathe faster. Then slower. You see spots. You feel dizzy. You hallucinate. You die. So, you surface. The diesels roar to life. The boat breathes again. Air floods in, foul but fresh. The batteries charge. You can sail faster, farther. Maybe even grab a clear horizon and feel a breeze on your face. And just like that, you've lit a beacon for every Allied aircraft within range. The U-boat has no armor up top. One lucky bomb, one well-placed depth charge, and you're scrap metal bobbing in the Atlantic. And with radar improving every week, the odds of being spotted are no longer if, but when. The Allies own the skies now. Historians note that by mid-1943, surfacing became one of the riskiest operations in a U-boat's life cycle. What was once routine, a daily battery charge at dusk, turned into a life-or-death window. Some crews called it the hour of exposure. Others referred to it, more bluntly, as feeding time for the eagles. Your captain tries to play it smart. He surfaces under cloud cover. At night. In remote zones. He listens. Watches. Hesitates. Sometimes he fakes a surfacing just to draw out patrolling aircraft. Once, it works. A British Sunderland appears within 20 minutes and circles like a vulture. You all stay submerged for 19 more hours. You nearly pass out waiting. Then there's the weather. Surfacing in calm seas is rare. Usually, the ocean throws a tantrum the moment you pop up. Waves smash against the conning tower. Rain blinds the periscope. You climb the ladder and nearly get swept into the drink just trying to tighten a hatch. One night, the sky clears just long enough for a beautiful sunset. It's blood orange, stretching across the horizon like a painting you forgot the world was capable of. You climb out, just to see it. You close your eyes and breathe in the sea air. A minute later, the air raid siren goes off. The lookout's voice cracks, "Aircraft!" 3 o'clock. The captain barks orders. "Dive! Now!" You scramble back inside. Slam hatches. Hold on as the boat tilts hard. You're under again. Safe? Maybe. Maybe not. And you think, 1 minute of beauty. 1 minute too long. Quirky bit of U-boat trivia? Some sailors developed superstitions around surfacing. One officer always chewed the same piece of gum while above water. Another refused to climb the tower without tapping the ladder 4 times, once for each engine cylinder. The captain hums an old marching tune every time you surface. He says it calms his nerves. You suspect it's the only thing keeping him from screaming. There are days you don't surface at all. The air gets thicker. The battery gauge flickers into the red. People talk less. Blink more. Sweat pools in their collars and doesn't dry. Your own lungs feel like damp paper bags. Still, you stay under. Because up there are spotlights and sonar buoys and aircraft that drop death in bright, screaming packages. But eventually, you have to surface. You have to breathe. And that's the cruelest part of U-boat life. The choice isn't between danger and safety. It's between drowning in the dark or being bombed in the light. Historians still argue about the optimum balance. Some commanders dove deeper, longer, risking suffocation to avoid being seen. Others surfaced often and ran fast, zigzagging like mad to avoid detection. Both strategies worked. Both strategies failed. There are no formulas here. Only gambles. Your captain plays his hand cautiously. And yet, last week, a friendly U-boat, U-550, went down less than 200 kilometers from your patrol zone. Surface too long. Spotted by AB-24. No survivors. You didn't know anyone aboard. But you felt it. The entire crew did. One night, surfaced under cover of fog, you watch the horizon while on watch duty. The waves are calm, the engine steady. And still, you can't stop glancing upward. The sky feels too big. Too quiet. Like it's watching. You're terrified of it. And yet, when the order comes to dive, a small part of you hesitates. Just a beat. Just long enough to realize. Down there, you might suffocate. Up here, you might burn. And every breath is just another wager. You drop a wrench. It's nothing, really. A small thing. Slips from your greasy fingers in the control room, bounces once on the metal floor, and clatters into the silence like a cannon blast. You freeze. Everyone freezes. Because right now, you're in silent running. And that wrench? That innocent little tool just became a potential death sentence. The U-boat isn't moving. Well, not much. The engines are dialed so low you can't even hear them, just a whisper of vibration beneath your feet. You're trying to be invisible, lost in the layers of the ocean, silent as a ghost. That's the only thing keeping the destroyer above from finding you. And now they might have heard you. You hold your breath, heart slamming in your chest, ears tuned for the worst sound in the world, the metallic ping of active sonar, followed by the distant splash-splash of depth charges hitting the water. The seconds tick by. Nothing yet. Maybe they didn't hear it. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe Poseidon owed you a favor. Or maybe they're just getting into position. Because during silent running, everything matters. Every sound. Every movement. You shuffle like a thief on a creaky floorboard. You only open hatches if absolutely necessary, and even then, you do it like you're tiptoeing through someone else's nightmares. A cough becomes a crime. A sneeze? A tactical disaster. Quirky fact, sailors would swallow coughs and even punches to the gut to keep from making noise during silent running. One report mentioned a crewman who accidentally broke his toe and still managed to limp without a sound for 20 minutes. He didn't even swear. He just bled into his boot and nodded grimly when asked if he was good. You're not just quiet, you're a machine of stillness. The cook doesn't stir anything. No pots clang. Cards aren't shuffled. Nobody even chews loud. You chew bread like it's glass, trying not to grind your teeth. And above you? The enemy waits. Destroyers, corvettes, fast attack boats, they're all listening. Every warship has sonar now. Some operators so skilled they claim to tell a type of submarine just by the echo. It's a skill developed through hundreds of hours listening to water bounce off steel. Historians still debate whether this level of detection was reliable or exaggerated. Some say the Allies' sonar tech was inconsistent, loud or choppy seas could confuse it. Others say the real danger wasn't the technology, it was the patience of the crews up top. Because a U-boat can stay quiet for hours. A destroyer can wait for days. And you can't stay silent forever. Eventually, something has to move. A valve sticks. A pipe groans. Someone shifts their weight wrong. The noise escapes. Then the ping starts. Not the passive echolocation, but the sharp, active sonar. They're searching. You feel it in your teeth, that pressure pulse from above. It slices through the water, bounces off the hull with a shudder. It knows you're there. It just hasn't found you yet. The captain signals, nothing vocal. Just a slow hand gesture. Maintain depth. Hold the course. You're under 100 meters. The hull creaks now, gently but ominously. The pressure is constant. If you dropped a marble, it would hit the floor with the same weight as a hammer. Your ears pop. Your chest feels tight. Every breath tastes of recycled fear. Someone sneezes. Not a big one. A polite, stifled little puff. But in the silence, it sounds like a grenade. Then the depth charges come. Boom. 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 The water jumps around you. The boat lurches. One man is thrown against the wall, bruises blooming on his arm like rust. A light flickers. Dust falls like snow. But you stay silent. No screaming. No scrambling. The only sound is the hiss of breath and the groan of metal under stress. You grip a pipe. You feel it vibrate. You try to picture something else, anything else. A park. A market. The sound of rain on a window. Another charge hits closer. The hull sings this strange, awful whine that makes your molars buzz. You think, this is what it must feel like inside a tuning fork seconds before it snaps in half. You don't realize you're whispering until your bunkmate shushes you. Eventually, the charges stop. The destroyer moves on. Maybe they gave up. Maybe they're circling back. You won't know for hours. But for now, the captain gives a nod. Silent running ends. You exhale. The wrench still lies where it fell. No one says anything, but the look from the engineer says enough. Don't let it happen again. You pick it up. You wipe your hands. You listen closely now to the rhythm of the boat, to your own breathing, to the way every sound, no matter how small, might ripple outward through hundreds of feet of ocean and find the one enemy with just enough luck and just enough time to make your U-boat a memory. And later, when you lie in your bunk, ears ringing from phantom charges, you wonder, how many more times can we be this quiet and live? You can feel it before anyone says anything. The air is thicker tonight. Not just the usual damp and diesel, there's a weight to it, like it's already been used too many times. You take a breath. It's stale. Another. There's something else now. A faint sour note. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. Someone nearby coughs, a dry, wheezing sound. You look at the co-scrubber gauges. No movement. Someone curses softly. The air purification system is faltering. The longer you stay submerged, the more the carbon dioxide builds. That's just how it works. Everyone breathes in oxygen and exhales CO, and when the scrubbers, the machines designed to remove the CO, start to fail, every breath becomes a little more toxic. There's no fresh air down here. Just air that gets recycled, passed through soda-lime canisters, filtered, and pushed back into circulation. But those canisters only last so long. And if one clogs or fails, you feel it immediately. You're breathing poison. Slowly. Quietly. Historians note that many U-boat crews experienced what's known as hypercapnia, elevated levels of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. The early symptoms: headaches, dizziness, confusion. The late symptoms: hallucinations, seizures, death. You already have the headache. The captain checks the scrubbers himself. Orders ration breathing. Yes, that's a real thing. People sit. Don't talk. Don't move more than needed. Less activity, less oxygen burned. Everyone becomes statues, guarding their lungs like hoarded gold. You sit on your bunk and close your eyes. Try to slow your breathing. You count each inhale. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. A man next to you fans himself with a letter from home. You envy him, not for the letter, but for the breeze. The cook tries to make coffee. No one drinks it. Too hot. You all crave cold, wet air. The kind that slaps your face when the hatch opens. But you're deep now. Surface is hours away. One guy starts humming under his breath. Another tells him to shut up. The air is thick with tension now. You can feel people trying not to breathe too hard. And then someone laughs. A short, high-pitched giggle. It's Keller again, the radio operator. The same guy who stopped eating 2 sections ago. He's blinking rapidly and pointing at nothing. Is that a bird? He whispers. That's a bird. There's no bird. There's nothing. But he sees one, flapping through the galley like it belongs there. He reaches out to touch it. No one says anything. The corpsman leads him away gently. You hear murmured instructions. A damp cloth. A water flask. The hallucinations have begun. Quirky detail. Some sailors reported seeing entire landscapes in the flickering light of malfunctioning bulbs. One said he watched a football match between 2 rats. Another claimed to see his mother, knitting in the aft torpedo room. Some believed the boat itself spoke, through pipes, creaks, vibrations. You're not there yet. But you feel it coming. The metal tastes funny. Not metallic, sweet. The way batteries smell when they overheat. You realize you haven't had a full breath in hours. You suck in through your nose, but it burns. Your chest hurts, not like illness, like altitude. You glance around. Everyone looks like you feel, sunken-eyed, wet-skinned, jaws slightly slack. A painting of slow-motion suffocation. Then the engineer gives the signal, the scrubber's back online. Not at full capacity, but functioning. A low whir starts in the background. A fan kicks in. A valve hisses. The boat breathes. So do you. Everyone does. Audible. Shameless. You can't smell fresh air, exactly. But the absence of the sour taste is enough. It's a relief so pure it's almost a high. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Gratefully. For now. But the damage is done. You can feel how close you came. A few more hours and someone might have dropped. Another day and maybe the whole boat would have gone silent, sinking under its own used breath. Historians still argue whether the lack of proper air management was an oversight or a necessity. The early Type 7 U-boats weren't designed for extended dives. Later models included snorkels, allowing them to run diesel engines while still mostly submerged, but by then, the Allies had radar, and even that tiny mast could get you killed. You try not to think about that. Instead, you think about real air. Forest air. Ocean air. That crisp morning snap that hits your lungs on a cold walk. You wonder if your lungs remember it. If they'll ever feel clean again. Tonight, you dream of windows. You don't open them. You just know they're there. And you sit beside one, letting the breeze brush your skin, cool and forgiving. Then you wake up. And the boat creaks. And someone's breathing too loud. And you remind yourself that, for now, the air is good enough. They're getting smarter. You can feel it in every decision the captain makes, every delayed surface, every hesitated course correction, every cancelled patrol zone. The Allies aren't just chasing you anymore. They're predicting you. And now, they're waiting. It didn't used to be like this. Not at the start of the war. Back then, the U-boats were hunters, slipping through convoys, striking like wolves in the fog. Back then, you had the edge. Surprise. Stealth. Superiority. Not anymore. Now the enemy has radar, real, reliable radar that can spot a periscope mast poking 2 inches above water from 10 kilometers away. And sonar, more sensitive than ever, sharp as a scalpel, able to ping your exact depth and bearing. They've cracked your codes. They've mapped your patrols. They know your tricks. Historians point to Allied code breaking, especially the Ultra program, as a turning point. Once the Allies began reading Enigma encrypted messages, they weren't just reacting, they were setting traps. Entire convoys rerouted to bait U-boats. Hunter-killer groups dispatched based on intercepted chatter. One U-boat commander once wrote, "We felt like fish swimming in a glass tank, visible, vulnerable, and doomed." You understand that now. Yesterday, you picked up a faint sonar ping. The captain ordered a dive and silent running. Standard. But then, nothing. No charges. No engine sounds. No plane. Just silence. They were testing. Waiting. It's psychological warfare now. You surface briefly to get fresh air and battery power. Not 10 minutes later, aircraft. A twin-engine Liberator, low and fast. You crash dive. No bombs drop. Why? Maybe they were marking your position for a destroyer. Maybe they were watching to see how long it takes you to react. Maybe they were just letting you know they could kill you anytime. You don't sleep well anymore. The Atlantic itself has changed. It used to feel endless, an ocean of opportunities. Now it feels occupied. Patrolled. Rigged. You sail into a zone and find nothing but empty water. 2 days, 3, no freighters, no tankers. Just waves. Then you realize this corridor was abandoned. The ships went elsewhere. They knew you'd be here. The war is still raging, but you've stopped being the predator. You're the prey now. And you're being studied. One of your watchmen spots a decoy, a derelict-looking freighter, listing lazily. No flag. Too slow to be real. The captain hesitates. Then, with a tone that sounds more tired than cautious, don't even think about it. You pass it. 30 minutes later, your hydrophone picks up the distinct propeller rhythm of 3 destroyers converging on that spot. A trap. You feel it in your gut, they were waiting for the smell of your diesel. Quirky bit of Allied ingenuity, some escort ships began deploying false sonar pings to lure U-boats into diving prematurely, draining their batteries and forcing them into predictable surfacing patterns. Others launched sonobuoys, floating microphones that listened passively for submarine noise. These weren't just counters, they were hunts. You and your crew are learning to play more cautiously. You rarely chase signals now. You hide more. Move less. Spend longer hours below, sacrificing comfort for concealment. It's not bravery anymore. It's survival. The veterans say it wasn't like this in 39 or 40. Back then, the sea was thick with targets. One torpedo could send 10,000 tons of steel to the bottom. Back then, you'd surface after a successful hit, engines full, and radio home the tonnage you bagged that day. Now? You don't even radio. Not because you're not allowed. But because you're afraid. Because you know the minute you key that MIC, someone might be listening. Not just someone, everyone. Historians still debate the exact moment the tide turned. Some say it was March 1943, when U-boat losses skyrocketed. Others point to convoy HX-229 and SCs-122, 2 massive Allied shipping groups that turned the tables and mauled U-boat wolf packs instead. Either way, one thing is clear. They know how to kill you now. Better than you know how to survive. You wonder what it must be like on their ships. Room to stretch. Hot meals. Radios that don't betray them. They get mail. Air. Sunshine. You listen through the hydrophone sometimes, not for tactical purposes, but just to hear the world. Ship propellers. Echoes of sonar. Once, music. A trumpet drifting over water. You don't even know the tune, but it sounds like color. You miss color. Down here, everything is steel gray, brown wool, pale skin, dim light. Your world is monochrome. The enemy lives in full spectrum. Another sonar ping. Your ears ring with it now. Even when it stops, the ghost of it lingers. And you think, they are not guessing anymore. They're aiming. Something's not right. Not in the way things are always not right on a U-boat. This is different. Subtle. Slippery. Like a shadow that keeps flickering in the corner of your eye, but when you turn to look, nothing. It starts small. A missing wrench. Then a misfiled navigational log. A fuse blown, even though it was brand new. You chalk it up to stress. To vibration. To the slow entropy of a machine under pressure. But then the engineer finds that someone manually disabled one of the cooling fans. And that's not stress. That's sabotage. The crew goes quiet when the word is spoken. No one wants to believe it. You're all down here together, after all. 50 men packed in a steel coffin. Everyone's counting on everyone else. If something breaks, someone dies. If someone breaks it on purpose, that's a different level of fear entirely. And yet, it happens. Historians acknowledge several incidents of sabotage aboard U-boats, though few were confirmed. Sometimes it was resistance fighters infiltrating maintenance crews back in port. Other times, it was crewmen cracking under pressure. And sometimes, it was neither. Just accidents that looked a little too suspicious, leaving paranoia in their wake. Now, you're feeling it too. Someone goes through your footlocker. Nothing stolen, but your spare socks are out of order. Your canteen's been moved. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe someone's checking for something. Notes. Maps. Intent. The officers begin asking questions. Quiet ones. Off the record. Notice anything strange? Anyone acting differently? Everyone says no. No one means it. You've started watching each other more closely. You catch yourself tracking who comes and goes from compartments. Who lingers near controls? Who asks questions that sound a little too technical for their role? And it doesn't help that the Gestapo visited before your patrol. They stood on the dock like vultures in leather trench coats, smiling with their teeth but never their eyes. They didn't say much. Just inspected. Took notes. Whispered to the captain. Left. Their presence said enough. Loyalty was being tested. Quirky side note, some U-boat crews carried small, unofficial loyalty tokens, a coin, a photo, a ribbon tied inside a hat. Something that said, "I'm one of you." After the war, a few veterans admitted they used those tokens to identify who'd been vetted and who hadn't. You don't have a token. You wonder if that means you're under suspicion. Then one night, a toolbox disappears. The entire forward crew is woken and searched. You're lined up like school children. Pockets turned. Lockers opened. The captain doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. The disappointment is worse than shouting. He ends the search with a sentence that chills you more than any sonar ping. If we can't trust each other, we won't make it home. The toolbox turns up the next day. Hidden behind an access panel. Carefully tucked away, not lost. Placed. Positioned. You start wondering if someone is trying to cause damage or just create fear. Paranoia is just as effective a weapon as a torpedo. Maybe more. You sleep with your locker latched now. You whisper less. You look over your shoulder before talking. And you notice things. Who smiles too easily? Who doesn't make eye contact? Who never volunteers for maintenance shifts but always seems to be around when something goes wrong? Historians still debate how widespread internal sabotage was. The official records? Sparse. But personal journals and letters tell a different story: strange malfunctions, unexplained disappearances, erratic behavior under pressure. On U-96, there was a sailor who went completely mute after being accused of signaling with a flashlight during surfacing. Never spoke again. No charges filed. No proof found. But no one forgot it. You feel that kind of fear now. It's a different kind of pressure, not the crushing tons of water above you, but the pressure of knowing that someone in your steel family might be secretly loosening bolts. There's a saying aboard, trust keeps the hull tight. You used to think it meant staying professional, keeping the systems in check. Now, you realize it's more literal. Because if trust cracks, so does everything else. You catch Keller, the radio man, staring at the depth gauge too long. You see Weber, the mechanic, pocketing something small and shiny. You hear murmured words in the mess, cut off when you enter. It could be nothing. Or it could be the reason none of you make it back. You think you've seen storms. You haven't, not until you've met the North Atlantic in winter, furious and alive, rearing over your U-boat like it wants to swallow you whole. It starts as a low rumble. Then the boat rocks. Then it lurches. A deep, gut-twisting roll that sends trays clattering and stomachs tightening. You're surface now, not because you want to be, but because you have to be. The batteries are depleted, the scrubbers are clogged, and the air below has the tang of too much breath and not enough forgiveness. And so, here you are. The boat slams through wave after wave like a drunk bull charging a stone wall. Salt spray assaults the conning tower. Rain knife sideways. The deck heaves under your boots, slick with water and streaked with foam. You're clipped in with a safety line, but it feels laughably flimsy, like tying yourself to a flying car hood during a tornado. Every second is a balance act between holding on and not dying. The lookout gets tossed hard. He lands on his side, sliding 2 meters before his harness jerks him back. You haul him upright with numb fingers. He laughs. Of course he laughs. That hollow, too loud laughter of someone who's just made eye contact with death and pretended not to blink. You wouldn't understand what the boat is doing unless you felt it. She's not sailing, she's fighting. Each rise and fall is a brawl between steel and sea. The hull groans with strain. Bolts creak. Somewhere, something metal shears with a sound like teeth breaking. You can't go back below, not yet. The hatches are sealed, and the command is to ride it out, charge what you can, and pray the antennas don't snap like matchsticks. Quirky U-boat fact, in some patrols, sailors nicknamed the worst storms after girlfriends. This one? You decide to call it Ingrid. Ingrid doesn't want to cuddle. Ingrid wants blood. The captain stays in the tower, soaked to the bone, shouting orders between squalls. He won't go below, not during storms. I need to feel her move, he says. You don't ask who her is, the sea, the boat, or fate. Historians still argue whether surface storms cause more casualties than enemy action. There's a case for it. Boats lost to rogue waves, torn hatches, or sailors swept overboard. 1 minute you're standing on deck, the next, you're gone. No splash. No scream. Just missing. Below decks, the chaos isn't much better. Water leaks in from somewhere, it always does. Supplies shift. One bunk is flooded. Another sparks when a short circuit blows a panel. You're bailing with a tin mug. That's not a joke. The galley is trashed. The stove's tipped sideways. The coffee pot is shattered. The cook weeps silently over a pile of beans, like a man mourning a fallen comrade. And then the vomit. You've smelled everything on this boat, but storm vomit is its own category. It mingles with diesel, with sweat, with bilge water. It crawls into your hair and never leaves. No one eats. No one talks. They just grip something and ride the demon bull that is this wave-thrashed coffin. Someone cracks a rib on a pipe. Someone else bites their tongue so hard it swells like a sausage. You keep your mouth shut and knees bent. And when it seems like things can't get worse, the forward hatch blows. A freak wave, massive, towering, laughing in the face of physics, smashes across the deck. Water crashes in. You lose a man. Not to the sea. To the impact. He's flung backward against a bulkhead. Doesn't move. You rush over, blood in your ears and your throat and your hands. He's not breathing. The captain bellows for triage. The corpsman comes. Everyone helps. No one breathes. Then, a pulse. Weak. Faint. But there. He'll live. Maybe. You tell yourself that counts as a win. The boat dives as soon as the storm clears just enough to risk it. The moment the hatch seals, the silence feels louder than the wind ever did. You flop into a bench and shake uncontrollably, not from cold, but from everything. From Ingrid. The lights flicker. A pipe hisses. Someone groans. The storm isn't over, it's just outside now. And in here, the damage is being counted. Water in the engine room. A ruptured air tank. 2 injured, 1 concussed, and a logbook that's now soup. You didn't even fire a torpedo today. And yet, it feels like you survived a battle. Historians sometimes call this the Forgotten War, the one waged not against Allied navies, but against the ocean itself. A war with no medals, no surrender, and no predictable strategy. Just weather. And the weather always wins. You lie in your bunk later, soaked to the bone despite dry clothes, feeling the phantom roll of the waves in your bones. Your hands still tremble. Your ears ring from the wind. You wonder how many more storms like this the boat can take. You wonder how many more you can take. And when you drift off to sleep, it's not bombs you dream of. It's waves. It's the sound that wakes you. Not an explosion. Not the ping of sonar or the rumble of engines. Just silence. Too much silence. On a U-boat, there's always sound. Humming. Breathing. Groaning metal. The occasional cough. Your brain gets used to that background orchestra. You depend on it. But now it's gone. Which means one of two things. Either something's broken, or something's very, very wrong. You sit up in your bunk. The lights are on, but dim to a murky yellow. A few others are already awake, blinking into the stillness. No one speaks. Then you feel it. The boat isn't moving. You brace against the wall and confirm what your inner ear already knows. There's no sway, no pitch, no rhythm. It's as if the sea itself has vanished. The captain's voice calls down the ladder, not urgent, but tight. Engine room, status. No response. Moments later, the engineer appears, covered in oil, face drawn. The diesel engines are out. All of them. And the batteries? Nearly drained. You're dead in the water. Historians note that engine failure aboard U-boats was rare but catastrophic. The design was robust, but when things did go wrong, usually after long patrols, saltwater corrosion, or sabotage, there was very little redundancy. If your diesel stopped and your batteries were low, you were a sitting duck in a metal coffin. Which is exactly what you are now. There's talk of surfacing. The batteries can't hold life support for more than a few hours. But surfacing without power means no propulsion. No ability to dive fast if spotted. No maneuvering. No escape. You'd be a log. Floating. Waiting. And you're in hostile waters. The captain decides, stay submerged. Use what's left of the batteries to buy time. Restart the diesels if you can. If not, well, there's no official plan B. Someone in the galley says it aloud. We're stuck. Someone else answers, softly. We're finished. Quirky but grim trivia, a few U-boats, when disabled beyond repair, scuttled themselves. Crews were ordered to open valves, flood compartments, and sink their own vessel rather than risk capture. One sailor reportedly lit a final cigarette and smoked it as the water rose to his chest, humming a lullaby. You're not there yet. But you're close enough to see that moment from here. The crew gets to work. Tools clank. Panels are opened. Fingers bleed. Sweat pours. The engine room becomes a hive of frantic whispers and whispered prayers. No one's eating. No one's resting. Everyone wants one thing. The thump of those diesels roaring back to life. Instead, you get another sound. A sonar ping. Distant. Faint. But unmistakable. You've been found. Or maybe not yet. Maybe it's a sweep. Maybe it's a chance. You power down the rest of the non-essentials, lights dim further, even the fans stop. Now you really feel the air thinning. Your lungs start noticing every breath. The silence grows louder. Still no engines. The sonar ping comes again. Closer. The engineer says they've bypassed a pressure regulator. It might work. It might also blow the whole intake line. But if they don't try, well, no one finishes that sentence. The captain nods. Do it. The crew braces. Then a cough. A mechanical one. Then a thump. Then a low, glorious rumble. Diesel. The boat breathes. The lights brighten. The batteries stop draining. Air starts cycling again. People exhale, not just relief, but hope. Actual, painful, stupid hope. But now you've got another problem. You've made noise. And whatever was sweeping the sea for you, it's already turning. You can feel it. Not from sonar. From instinct. The captain gives the order, emergency dive. Back into the depths. Full silent running. Use the rest of the battery to get low before switching over. You move like your life depends on it. Because it does. The sea groans. The hull creaks. The depth gauge spins. Then you're under. Dark. Silent again. But this time, your heart's hammering. Because for one moment, just a breath, you were free. And now you're hunted again. Historians argue whether moments like this were the worst of U-boat service. Not battle, not boredom, not fear. But the in-between. The feeling of survival almost achieved. The engine turning over just in time. The boat dipping just fast enough. The enemy almost seeing you, but not quite. You live in that almost. And it's exhausting. Later, you hear someone say, I think we've got another 24 hours. Another says, I'll take 12. You say nothing. Because what you want isn't more hours. It's more chances. Just one more. You've surfaced again. This time, there's no celebration. No rush of fresh air. No high fives or laughter. Just a tired boat on the open sea, running on fumes and frayed nerves, praying to ghosts that no one sees it. It's your final leg. You're heading home, or what passes for home now. The boat's battered. Systems are limping. One of the forward tanks leaks a little. The battery levels are a joke. The engine still knocks when the revs climb too fast. You haven't seen a convoy in days, but that doesn't mean you're safe. It just means the ocean is quiet. And that kind of quiet? It's never good. The crew's gaunt. Faces sunken. Eyes hollow. You've all lost weight. Some wear the same pair of socks since week 2. You've stopped noticing the stink. Or maybe you've just adapted to it. Like rats. Like mold. But beneath all that, beneath the stink and grease and half-healed bruises, there's a flicker. A tiny flicker of almost belief. Could you make it? You're not sure. Historians have records of U-boats that reached home port with less than 15 minutes of battery life. One sailed into port with a hand crank on the dive planes and no diesel fuel at all, towed the final mile by a fishing boat. Another arrived with only 6 living crew. No captain. Survival was rarely glorious. Mostly, it was barely. Your captain doesn't speak much anymore. His voice is hoarse. He's aged 5 years in 50 days. But he still stands at the conning tower. Still scans the horizon like a sentinel guarding some ancient gate. And what does the horizon offer? Clouds. Endless sea. A gull, once. Maybe. Probably a trick of the light. No ships. No allies. No welcome. Just water. Someone starts humming a folk song. You don't remember the words, but the melody's old, older than war, maybe. Something about rivers and safe harbors. You listen, and for a second, your lungs feel lighter. Then the hydrophone chirps. Not a sonar ping. Not a ship propeller. But a broadcast. And it's not from high command. It's Allied. They're transmitting in German. The voice is crisp, clinical. To the crew of U-boat, your number, we know your position. We advise surrender. Drop ballast tanks and surface. Do not attempt escape. Silence. Then they say it again. The cook drops a tin cup. Historians still argue about how often this happened. Allied psychological tactics aimed directly at U-boats during their return. Some say it was a bluff. Others insist the Allies had aerial recon and were ready to strike any boat they couldn't intercept by radio. What matters is this: they know where you are. Now it's a choice. The captain stays quiet for a full minute. Then, he makes the call. Maintain course. Ignore it. The order is soft. Steady. But your hands sweat. Because now you're gambling not on stealth, but speed. The next 2 days are a blur of tension. You surface only when you must. Run submerged longer than is safe. The batteries are begging for rest. So is your spine. But you don't stop. And then, finally, land. A grey smudge on the edge of the world. Not beautiful. Not even whole. Just a coastline. A promise. There's no band playing. No cheers. Just the crunch of boots on damp planks as the dock crew ties up your floating wreck. You climb out, bones aching, eyes squinting in daylight you can't quite believe is real. You've made it. You're not cheering. You're not smiling. You're just out. And you realize surviving wasn't one big heroic act. It was millions of tiny ones. Breath by breath. Shift by shift. Hour by agonizing hour. You shake the captain's hand. He looks surprised. Then he nods. Someone says they're going to find bread that isn't grey. Someone else promises never to eat pickled herring again. You all laugh, soft, dry laughs. You survived. But you wouldn't recommend it. The boat is docked now, silent and still, its rusted hull steaming in the late afternoon sun. The crew has disembarked, their footsteps faded into the harbour mist, their voices no longer bouncing off the curved steel walls. Below deck, the smell lingers, diesel and brine, old boots and forgotten rations, but the tension is gone. So are you. You're lying still, finally, in a real bed that doesn't creak with every swell of the sea. The ceiling doesn't drip. The walls don't sweat. You're not listening for pings, not watching the depth gauge. Your ears are ringing, but only faintly, like a seashell held up to the past. You close your eyes and feel the room not moving. It's a strange sensation. Almost unsettling, after all that time submerged. But then you breathe. Deeply. Freely. The air smells like wood and soap. And not like 50 unwashed men packed into a torpedo tube. It's over. The ocean still exists, out there, vast and terrible. But it's behind you now. The pressure, the noise, the waiting. The storm that had your name in its mouth. And somehow you're still here. Maybe your hair's thinner. Your hands shake sometimes. Maybe you'll never forget the sound of a depth charge landing too close. Or the way the light flickered when the batteries died. Or the exact expression on a man's face the moment he realized he wouldn't be going home. But you did. You went. You endured. And now you rest. The sea might take others. The war might stretch on. But for tonight, you're wrapped in stillness. And somewhere far below, in the cold dark, that old U-boat dreams quietly, rusting into memory. So let go of the weight now. Loosen your jaw. Soften your breath. There's nothing else to do. Nothing left to fear. Only this calm. Only this silence. Only sleep.